Alrighty. Let's see if my magic's worked. It has. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being so patient. I've undeafened. I've done what I needed to do. I apologize for the delay. It is completely my fault. I tried to edit. I tried to put all of our faces within boxes. And I think I did a pretty good job, guys. But come on. First time. First time for everything. It's not bad. Let me introduce everyone. I have Emily Rand here right next to me. We have Jordan Lyric, Corby from the LPL, and we have Clement Chu as well, guys. How you feeling? We had a bit of a chat before, but how you feeling running into the show?
You're late. You made us late. You made us wait.
No positivity.
I have your stream up. I don't even fit in my box, brother.
You fit in the box, dude. Look at the editing I did. You fit in the box. Just shrink down a little bit. You'll be okay. You'll be all right. I don't fit in the box either, but I don't know how Munchballs does it with bevies with the boys, but obviously this will be my first and last show. So thank you, Jordan. Thank you for the positivity. Of course, we are here for this
first and last.
Well, after this, I think Emily, I did a really good job with your box because at the end, I got that center exactly right. I gave you headspace as well, which I've denied Jordan. So yeah, I gave you the best box. So yeah, apologies for being late. This is a preview show, one of the first I wanted to try because I feel like talking about LPL rosters is always a lot of fun. And how you guys been coming out of the off season, right? Like first thing, like Clement Chu, by the way, who is our man who's kind of leaving us behind. So how are you feeling running out of spring and going into a new split of PCS, also LPL Summer?
Well, it just feels great to, because I'm actually working from home these days, and I'm not really going back to Shanghai. So I just felt like it was more comfortable to commit to something that you're going to be there for long term for, and just doing other things on the side. But I will miss you guys, and I still will tune in for LPL because that league is the best league to watch.
You still have amazing insight. And I think it's really big to note that like your insight will always be valued in the league, no matter what. So another reason to have you on the show, Emily as well. We all know that you have the biggest brain in esports. You watch so many leagues. I don't know when you sleep. What time is it right there now?
I don't sleep. It's 11:30.
Oh god. Okay.
Yeah, and the way I'm resetting my sleep schedule is staying up for a K-pop show. So I definitely have my life together.
Jordan's the same for you, isn't it? Because you're in Arizona, right?
Yep, it is same time. But again, you're helping me out because after MSI, I thought, darn, I have no time. I had to fly to the East Coast to visit my family real quick. I get back, I have 5 days to fix my sleep schedule, watch LDL players, catch up on the patch. So thank you for helping me stay up.
Well, my pleasure, guys. And with that, maybe running straight in will be the next best maneuver. This is going to be a really fun split. I think LPL Summer's going to be proven to be, some big roster changes that need to be talked about. And I want to start at the top here. I want to go through each and every single roster if you guys are cool with that, because for me, starting with each roster, like there are decent changes across the board. Now we have a bit of a roster document here and we'll be reading out. Let's start with BLG. I think this is the easiest place to start. We'll go alphabetically. And with BLG, we're looking at like the old V5. We've got Pete Bigold, Wayware, and Bew back together. And then we have Zika and aiming our imports with the new 80 carry and rise. This team actually looks like a lot better. Starting with Clement.
Yeah, I think this team is gonna have basically what they did here was they said that I guess I should start for the top, but I felt like last split it was mainly about like team fight setup. Were you gonna play into the team fights around the Drake objectives or not? And BLG was always a team that kind of was stuck in between. I think they definitely lean more towards the tempo play style. And they tried initially, I think, to start to play a teamfight style around aiming as their hypercarry big ADC. And this season is a very clear signal that is out the window. That's completely scuffed. They're going full tempo all the way. They're going to get Zika basically roaming 24/7 and have the same hit squad vibe that V5 used to have. So it's a very clear signal in where BLG want to head, and I think that it's a good bridge to connect what they were at the later half of the split onto the new summer season.
Yeah, I feel like BLG for me is a team that, like, and I'll talk about improvement here to kick things off, right? Like, I love that hit tempo squad you look at. I think Zika aiming, for me, are two big players I want to watch. I was really high on Zika. When he was back in on Vici. Lyric and I don't know if you were dissing me or not. I can't remember. You weren't happy with him, were you? You didn't like Zika too much.
I'll say my opinion on BLG for last because
Yep.
I want to be the guy who brings the negativity. So,
Oh,
I
good.
feel like
Oh,
Emily's
God.
probably going to say some positive things, and then, I can kind of tear down the conversation a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Well, before you go to the negativity, Emily, what do you actually think about BLG? Because my opinion is I think they're a lot better of a squad. I love, I really like seeing Zika's development just to finish up that point. But how do you approach BLG for this split, and what are your kind of upcoming thoughts?
I think they've improved. Like, I think the roster changes they made are a general improvement. The only thing that I worry about with BLG is like they'll have to have some sort of like rare atom run, right? Because LPL is like so strong at the top. I don't think these changes are enough to catapult them into like even they're we'll talk about them later, but like they're the top teams, and then there are teams I think they're on the bubble of like if they have a good split, if they hit a good meta that really suits them, they'll shoot to the top of the standings, right?
Yep.
And I still don't see BLG as that sort of team either. I do have some questions about PP God as well, or let's just say the PP God aiming bot lane. I'm curious to see how aiming does on his own because I think unlocking PP God is going to be really huge for this team. I think he looked significantly worse when he was kind of like chained to lane outside of like super early
Yeah.
2v2s. So um I want to see how the team deals with that. Or maybe aiming and PP God have really good laning synergy. Like we've seen, I feel like we've seen PP God with someone that he has really, really good laning synergy with, despite the fact that apparently they couldn't even talk to each other because they
True.
barely spoke each other's language. And then we saw him with someone that he didn't have good laning synergy with, and the difference is very, very apparent. So that is another concern I have with this roster. But if it ends up working out, we've seen how good he can be. So that's kind of a big question mark for me.
He's definitely a core player to watch. Lyric, you want to round out here because I think
Yeah, bring the negativity.
Yeah,
I mean, surprisingly, I didn't even need to because you came in with a really like level-headed, reasonable take, and like to me, I feel like this team is just gonna be a budget V5, right? I feel like you look at this roster. I'm not sold on Zeke at all. I think Zeke had
no.
really good moments in that first split. I remember like his LeBlanc game, things like that were really good, right? His
Mhm.
assassins where he can roam, he looked really impactful. But my problem with this roster overall is I feel like it'll be like BLG at the very beginning of last split, where I don't know if you guys remember, but they were able to get like 2K gold leads almost every game, but in mid game they really didn't know how to transition. And it's like, okay, I think PP God's definitely a step up in laning phase than like the former supports that Aiming was playing with. So I think BLG's bot lane should be pretty good. But another issue I have with V5 is I actually don't know if that'll matter for BLG. I'm sorry, because last split, we saw them try to put BiliBili on carries every single game. And yeah, BiliBili was decent on carries and isolated laning. He was all right. But I really don't understand why you do that. You have this player who's average in the LPL, isn't really going to punch above his weight in terms of like going against Nuggery, the Shy, Zoom, etc.
True.
And yeah, I don't have a lot of faith, I guess, in BLG's like coaching staff or like setup for how this team will interact. Because we saw last split, they had a great system that could have potentially worked with playing around aiming, and like they didn't win games and they suddenly gave up on it so fast and they just suck. So
That roster
I don't
changed at
know.
the start of the season, didn't it? Like it looked really promising, right? Just on your point of aiming, and then it kind of just fell off a cliff. And I have to apologize to I don't know if it was both of you guys from LPL or maybe to audience, but I really hyped up BiliBili coming into that split. I thought BiliBili was good. Probably
He
was.
said BiliBili was the Shy. You
I
said
said
that,
he was
bro.
up and
Wait,
coming.
what?
No. As an IG fan, I
Oh,
said he
no.
has potential, and then I saw him play, and I thought, this is why I'm not paid the big bucks. This...
Yeah,
I was
like,
wrong.
Interesting take.
BLG last well, I like off of what Jordan was saying is that Meteor would have these really exquisite early games. He would plan out everything correctly. They would go into a Drake fight and blow the fight completely, which was really weird because we always, when we came into that split, we thought BiliBili was definitely going to fold into the bottom lane, and then he
Yeah.
became a Jace one trick for
True.
out of nowhere, and essentially BLG is going to roam Zika and PP God up to BiliBili, which is. Again, I'm not exactly sure if that's what you want to do.
I feel like the most likely result of BLG for me is it'll probably just end up being the Weiwei show, which is kind of what V5 was last split, right? It was like the Weiwei and Mole show, and we saw that that didn't work. And it's like, okay, now you have a worse mid laner, a mid laner who I don't think plays as much around jungler as Mole did. And yeah, that just kind of leaves, okay, our aiming and PP God going to be able to win bots so hard that then PB God can roam and they can snowball off that. And yeah, I mean, like Emily said, right? LPL's so stacked. I actually don't think that that's good enough. Maybe they make playoffs to split. I definitely think they, can hit 9th or 10th, but I think anything above that would be a bit of a surprise.
Okay. I'm not too surprised by your answer. I mean, I look at BLG as a team that I expect, I'm going to say this, expect to make the jump to playoffs just because I have a lot of faith in where PP got to bring back what Emily was saying. Like, this team does feel like it revolves a lot around the support and how PP God synergizes, not just with aiming, but I think getting back into that timing that he did with Weiwei when, it was on the Mole roster. It was like PP God and Weiwei were essential and were the success of V5 in that 2020 Summer Split. And I think here again in this roster, is it fair to say to you guys that, PP God and Weiwei, that same kind of synergy is going to be important, or am I stuck in a meta that maybe it's going to be irrelevant going forward?
No, I think it's going to be important. I also think, and I don't know how true this is, but I would love it for LPL because a lot of the junglers kind of ignored / tried to skirt around the full clear meta anyway by getting involved with lanes early, regardless, despite the fact that it wasn't the most efficient thing to do. I have heard that it's turning into a little bit more of a meta where junglers are going to be involved with their lanes a lot earlier. That could be a good sign if they have good roam timings and good communication between Weiwei and PP God again, because it'll like basically if they can, sync up their lane like wave timings with what those two are doing, then it's actually a really good recipe for success. I just don't see it's a lot of ifs, right? Like it's a lot of like if this meta hits and if these two have the same synergy and if aiming and PP God also have good bot lane synergy, and also if we have another team that we expect to be at the top kind of like faltering.
Okay. I also like that
It's
you
a lot.
talk about jungles maybe interacting more with lanes. Catch-up experience back in the game might actually change the landscape quite a lot. It's been talked about. So, yeah, I like the take on to BLG. I will move forward because I know we have 17 teams to get through, and I want to touch each and every of them. Some of them, let's be honest, are going to be trash. That's the way it is. No punches held. My job, lucky to have it. Let's go to EDG next, because EDG is a team that really haven't changed at all. Let's just quickly go through the roster again. We have Flandre Xiaosheng, we have Jie, Clearlove, and Junja is also back on the roster in a third position in jungle. We have middle and scout, ADCs, Viper and Hope, Mako, and then Maokai Corgi, and Kenju, I also believe, into the coaching stuff. So who wants to open this one up? Who wants to open up with EDG as a team that, like, again, top 3 in playoffs?
For me, I think EDG was a team that was a little bit too timid in spring. I think they had the roster to do a lot more, play a lot of different styles, but they didn't really pull it off until the last 2 games of playoffs. They were like, wait a minute, RNG can teamfight better than us. Bring on the Syndra. Let's go, boys. We have to try and fight them early game. And I felt like that was a bit of a mistake. For me, this is a roster that can definitely play more tempo rather than stick to full team fighting. They almost played exactly the same way when they had Hope. Despite adding Flandre and Viper to the roster, which I felt like they could have played a little bit harder early game, try to split push a little bit more. So, for me, EDG, they don't really change much, but the problem is, are they willing to experiment more? Have they finally learned the lesson of playoffs, where they weren't able to match RNG and try to experiment more into going early into tempo? And I think another big question, a kind of looming question about all of these roster discussions is, how are the teams going to hedge against future metas? For Spring Split, mid laners were not very important. Out of our top 5 mid laners, only one of them made semifinals, and that was, I think it was Knight. So mid laners were not particularly important. Team fight setup was really important, and a lot of lower tier teams were, basically all-inning on top side in Herald fights, stuff like that. So I think there will be a lot of hedging and talking about archetypes, like how does this roster fit into a certain archetype? Are they going to go team fight? Are they going to go more scuffy? Are they looking to do more split pushing and stuff like that? So EDG, same roster, very, very high level. I still think they're going to be like a top 4 team, but I do want to see them experiment a little bit more and try to branch off from just standard 5v5 old stuff.
I feel like you made one really interesting point about you hit on side lanes, because I think Scout specifically, in my mind, has like his best in like the recent splits when he was on like Irelia, back in 2020, or
Yeah.
Silas, or things like this, where like Scout's a really good side lane player, and I think Scout is also like an exceptional flanker. And it's so sad that we don't see EDG utilize that more, right? Because I mean, it's kind of a meme, at least with Western fans. Don't know how Chinese fans feel, but whenever Scout pulls out his ear, I just see our chat, like going berserk of like, oh my god, please Scout, not again. It's like, dude, I kind of agree. Scout's control mages are fine, right? Like, still a top tier mid laner, but when he's playing something with more proactivity or agency, it feels like EDG just level up significantly. And I mean, everyone knows throughout Phalange's career, he's been like a side lane split push sort of king. I think he's a great flanker. Even this split in EDG, it's like when he was on something like an Aatrox and confined flanks, it was just beautiful. So I definitely want to see EDG play more styles, because out of the top teams, EDG are like the least interesting one, in my opinion. They play so... I don't even know how to put it.
I like
Because, again,
Clement's
I feel
word
like
of timid.
standard is...
I
they
like timid play.
It's
I
like...
feel like. Oh no, go.
Emily, no, you, because it's so weird to me. It's just like, okay, wait 5 minutes for dragon, set up for dragon, hope for the best. That's what EDG is to me, and I don't like it.
Here's what I think there. So I agree. I think they could actually benefit. Like, how you get beaten by a team and it's really close and you're like, ah, and then you look at why you lost. And RNG are a team that, as I've said throughout all of MSI, they over index on side lanes, like sometimes to the detriment of everything else. Obviously, it worked out for them at MSI, but they're incredibly good at silent pressure and 1-3-1 split or 4-1 split, and I feel like EDG could learn a lot from that in some of their like failings against RNG. The way I see this team though is that they're torn between that style, like branching out and maybe trying that out, and then old EDG where they would always focus bot lane, right? Like they would just constantly focus bot lane, and obviously bringing Flandre onto this team has changed that significantly. Like I no longer even have to make the joke like, wow, EDG's jungler is going topside, because like it's already such a regular thing that it's not a joke anymore. But I still saw this team kind of torn between those two styles of, do we want to play more to side lane pressure? Do we want to try to play towards top lane prio that Flandre can get? Do we want him to play funkier things that we know he has in his pocket? Or do we want to do the traditional standard EDG thing where we're trying to like cream bot lane tower and get it down before like 10 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever weird ass record they're going for to get that bot lane turret down, and then transfer it into Drake control, and then transfer that into 5v5 team fighting. And I saw the team kind of like vacillating between those two things, especially around a lot of pressure that Viper could bring, not only in lanes, but also in 5v5 fights. So I would like to see, I agree, like I would like to see them branch out, because I think the ceiling for this team is like actually remarkably high.
Some of the best in their role, just to add on to that. And I think that's why, like, when you guys are, Clement talking about it being timid and looking for EDG to branch out, my thoughts are like, well, Viper for me was the best AD carry in the split. Just especially the regular season. Better than people like Jaculov, like Gala was still finding his footwork. And I still think Viper is a better player than Gala. I still think Jaculov is a better player than Gala, even though he's been hyped up after MSI. That's a different discussion. But Scout was playing some of his best mid games, to reiterate on what you guys said as well. We look at a jungler like Jeje, who has been up and down throughout the course of his career, who we all thought were going to see clear love, and then we saw Jeje playing some of his best jungle games. So I think we're looking at a roster that is still some of the best in their roles. But if they branch out, maybe they could take that first or second spot. Just to round out EDG, do you guys look at this team as, okay, definite top 4? If they're not top 4, something's gone wrong? Or is it like a top 2 situation where you're confident to put them in the upper echelon?
I honestly feel like this team can take the championship. It's just a matter of like, do they actually try and play as hard as possible and actually patch up all of those spots? And to round out the conversation, I actually think a lot of it, like, I agree Scout is a great side lane player. individually when he's on a side lane, he has tremendous pressure as a Akali. He knows all the blind spots around vision and all of that. But historically, Scout has actually been really, really weak in terms of collapsing from a side lane, like, or when to collapse. Yeah, often does the death push a little bit too much, and the team gets pulled so out of position, and they lose Barons and whatever. So actually have a sinking suspicion is that they tried the Scout thing, and they were like, wait a minute, we're actually winning games here. Maybe we should just try and keep this style and just prove that Viper was a great purchase. Let's do that for one split. Now they've done that. I hope they can go wild in summer. This is definitely a championship-worthy team.
You guys want to round me out with any other thoughts, Lyric? You were negative then again. I don't know if you really want to hone down.
I wasn't negative saying top 4. Like, I mean, again, right? You look at FPX, EDG, Top Esports, RNG, even JDG, right? I feel like predicting any of these teams is like solidly top 2 is impossible, right?
Okay.
It's like I still expect EDG to be in that conversation. I still think EDG can definitely win LPL Summer and, you know, potentially maybe then a World Championship, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I feel like there's just so much competition at the top. It's hard to say. And, you know, I even have friends on the EDG coaching staff. I can't say I have that much faith in EDG drastically changing things up because, you know, I don't know if we've ever seen that.
Okay, I thought you were going to leak. I thought we were going to go into a leak there. Let's move forward. For EDG, you know, a team that still has its great roster together. We'll move on to another team that is still honing in on its success. FPX, who came second towards Spring Finals. We thought FPX were going to go all the way, honestly. I actually thought I turned... sorry, I thought I actually turned off emotes there for a second. Excuse me. FPX are the next team. And we're running Nuguri, Tien, Doomby, LWX River, Crisp, Stake, and Refrain are the coaching staff. So we haven't got a change on this team, bar River, who's come up from the LDL. And I don't believe he's been playing that long either. So, you know, same roster, same power. Who wants to start weighing in on this one?
I'll go. I don't think I've taken one first. I still think this is going to be a really good team. I also think they need to decide what they're going to do. Like what I assume, since Tien is the only jungler announced for now, they're going to wait out until Bo's suspension is over, which I believe ends July 1st. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. So I think the big question now, speaking only after the finals, actually is, you know, the fact that they did bump River up, because they're like, LWX had a pretty, like, honestly, like, historically bad performance for him. Like, typically, like, I don't think he's like insane best 80 carries in LPL, but it's really, it's also rare that I see him have a series that bad. And he had a really rough finals. So I think they took a look at this team. I think Tien was kind of the surprise to me. The resurgence of Tien was something I was definitely watching, and since I was expecting FPX to go to MSI, I was actually going to write about that and like really talk about that, how he came back and they you know, were able to regain that kind of pressure that they had from Chris roaming, from Tien being everywhere, from Doinby being everywhere, and having that really aggressive, proactive 3-man kind of roaming squad is something that FPX, if the meta allows it, they're always going to be just this phenomenal team because they're so good at it. And Nuguri has been a tremendous addition to this team thus far. So, I mean, I fully expect them to be contending for the title still. And I like the fact that they bumped up River for what I assume is insurance, because I know LWX seems to work really well with the team, but he did have, again, a historically bad finals. Like, that was very out of character for him. I've seen him make individual mistakes before, but never that consistently throughout a really important series.
Yeah, it was actually a horrible gameplay from LWX. River behind him maybe puts the fire into him. I know there's a bit of a cop-out because it's said with many different rosters around the world, you know, having a second player in that position, it's like, well, if you don't perform, then we'll put River in, and maybe that changes how LWX plays. I know it worked with Ning when he had Le Yen, then replacing him for quite a while. The biggest point there is, like, Bo getting out in week 5. So it is week 5. And you're right with the date there. So whether FPX run this new jungler or not is going to be a big question. Lyric, Clement, do you guys want to step in, walk me through a little bit about your feelings of FPX?
Honestly, for FPX, I kind of want to hit the bow point first. You know, I feel like week 5 is so late into the split that, like, unless they're absolutely bombing out, I kind of hope they just stick with Tien. Again, we already kind of
Okay.
hit on the jungle XP, and like certain changes in the jungle could open
Mhm.
up ganking junglers more. I hear from scrims that that's actually not necessarily going to be the case, but you know, scrims are scrims. I feel like things can still definitely change on stage, but Tien was solid throughout playoffs. You know, again, missed some time because of injury. I think Tien's still a great jungler. Obviously, problems last year with FPX that I don't think we're ever going to really know why FPX dropped off so hard. But to me, this is just going to be a team that is going to be very interesting to watch depending on the meta. Because from looking at solo queue, from looking at from hearing about scrims, the most interesting thing to me about the meta is apparently the mid lane champion pool is like completely wide open right now. A lot of people are playing like assassins in the mid lane. Of course, we have like
Wow.
champions like Viego now enabled. Top,
Mhm.
we'll probably see some Gwen,
Sure.
and it's like, you know, it's interesting because a lot of Doing Beast champions do very well into like things like assassins or, you know, different kinds of champions, but I still think that it might hurt FPX a bit. And obviously teams like IG and Top Esports might rise up more with, you know, Knight and Rookie getting more freedom. So this is a team I'm just really interested to see where the meta ends up. And then the only other thing I have about FPX is, from what I understand, I think River is purely a kind of motivation move for LWX. I did
Okay.
watch some of
Okay.
Funplus Blaze's games, and he's not really particularly a standout player. He's okay. He's, again, more of like this like late game team fight sort of AD carry. Does play everything. Has played like champions like Draven, Ashe. Like the guy plays it all, but definitely much more of a role player. But still, right? That might even be enough for FPX. If LWX isn't playing well, put him bot lane, let Chris Brome. You have Nuggery top. So definitely still a contender, like Emily said, but I don't know. FPX are always going to have certain question marks to me whether they will be a championship contender, like they can take the title, or they'll just be like top 3 or 4.
Yeah, I want to start off by saying that the baseline for FBX is extremely high. I felt like if you play the last finals 9 times out of 10, FBX probably do win it. And if you look at it was basically just like a Krug mistake where Nuguri and Tien overforced and they lost that series. They
Yeah.
could have closed that game out from a 2-0 start very, very easily. So the baseline for FBX is incredibly high. And I just think the question is like, what happens to their bot lane and whether Tien can continue to perform at that level. If you look at what RNG did in that finals, I felt like it was pretty smart. They basically hard banned out Chris. They were sending like 3 to 5 bans at Chris and just making sure he can't engage. And then Tien filled in the gap with something like Hecarim. But I don't expect that to be the case in most metas. And that's kind of where I sort of have some doubt. I feel like this is a team that has very, very strong laning. They can play towards their top side. They will be very consistent through Nuguri. But when it comes to 5v5s, I do think that other more standard teams like EDG or RNG can knock them down a peg in that sort of scenario. And that's just kind of always kind of been the FBX thing. Early game, I really have no question about this team. It's mainly just about jungle position and how do they end up looking in a 5v5 and how do they kind of string together the picks to face the challenges from other more traditional teamfight teams.
Yeah, see if we can go back to, you know, old school FPX. I think we had glory in that split where, or maybe it was towards playoffs where we saw, you know, the best out of FPX that some of us expected. Again, everything fell apart and there's a lot of excuse for this roster when they lost Bo in the middle of the split and Tien had to step in and there's obvious issues with Tien. So I think FPX is anybody's guess with Tien starting, and whether, as Lyric said, you know, you don't want to see them run Bo if he comes back in week 5. Well, I guess we have to wait and see what happens with that squad. Interesting roster with minimal changes there. I'm going to move on. I know, again, a lot of teams, and I'm loving this so far, guys. A big thank you to the special guest for coming on again. Let's go on to IG, my favorite squad. I am unapologetic about loving this team because they're like my emotional mood. You don't know, you
I'm
wake
so
up one
sorry.
morning and down it goes. Invictus Gaming, the Shy, Nini, who's also come on in and has been confirmed is starting, by the way. Shun in jungle, Rookie. Then we have Wink, Puff, Snow. We have Lucas Bowland, Southwind. No Faye has been one of the biggest acquisitions as well, with Along as his coach. So who wants to open up IG and say all the positive things first?
This
think
team
this
is
is
just
a-
question marks to me.
No, that's
Like,
not
Yeah.
positive.
Clement, take
I
it
have
away. Clement,
no
take it
idea
away.
what's going
Alright,
on with this team.
this is basically like a slaughterhouse for coaches, okay? They import a new coach every single split, they
True.
throw him in, and they see what happens. And basically, the players just chew the coach out, and they come out, and, Kim didn't have a lot of nice things to say about the players. He swapped teams immediately.
Yep.
And I wonder what Nofe's going to do, because Nofe, for me, is pretty interesting. He's actually been a coach for EDG in 2016, and that was a very successful split for EDG. So hopefully this is a player that knows how to work inside of like the LPL environment and actually just rein everything in. But
Yeah.
I don't know, man. This is IG has always been a kind of madhouse that's been run by players, and it's I don't expect a lot of changes. I think probably like the changes to the meta are likely going to be more important than the coaching changes. That's going to be
Yep.
my guess.
I definitely like, to me, this team once again will be, if we're in a meta like last year where you remember we had things like LeBlanc, Silas, Echo,
Mhm.
like so many different champions. If Rookie can get champions where he can just pull them across the finish line, I think IG will do well. But I'm actually completely fine with LPL teams having terrible drafts if it suits their players. LPL has broken me. I'm
Mhm.
fine with that. But their drafts against RA blew my mind. And that was a series where they were like early picking Draven for Wink. They had like no frontline throw at any of their games. They were losing lane with Draven in that series also as well. And it was just so weird. And to me, yeah, I just don't know how to feel about IG. I definitely think they should just keep indexing to their strengths. I think Shun definitely improved throughout the split. I think Shun's a
Mhm.
player to be excited for. I think Lucas, even though a bit underwhelming, I still think he's better than both Balan and Southwind if they're not going to
Yep.
pick up another support. So, it'd be nice to see him. But I don't know. Bot lane is a massive liability. Clement just talked about all the other existential issues with IG. And this team, I don't know. They're always going to be a dark horse, but they're also going to be a dark horse for being a dark horse. So I just have no idea.
And
And I can go on a
Yeah.
completely non-analytical tangent.
Okay.
Okay, the problem with this team is that they have a mental blockage. Ever since 2019 MSI, this team has not won a playoff series. They will win
That's true.
qualifiers, but they have not won a playoff series. So the only thing that can get their mojo back is if they somehow squeak once again into Worlds without winning playoffs. I don't even know if that's possible. Maybe it's possible. Someone do the point
Maybe.
calculation. They take down Team Liquid, and then the curse is lifted.
And then
That
they
is the
had
only
so they
thing that can
basically
save
have
this
to
team.
beat Team Liquid. Oh god.
Yeah, without doing that, I
Um,
think they can't get past their mental blockage.
Okay. Emily, do you want to
Yeah,
elaborate?
so I mean, I think the good things about this team, the parts that I really love, are Rookie and Shun. I actually think Shun is he's someone who I was really hyped about, came in, kind of struggled sometimes.
Yeah.
So it really depended on, again, whether Rookie could get ahead in lane and kind of like one thing that FPX did when they were integrating Bo, right, is they had Crisp taking a lot of the rotations to reset Joey B's lane and taking over some of those timings and stuff. And IG never really had that luxury because of the support issues that we've already talked about. So
Yeah.
it was really all up to Rookie to try to cover for him. And sometimes he could do it and sometimes he couldn't. But I did think you saw steady improvement from him, and I do like the way that their mid jungle has developed. I think it's going to be more on Rookie, right? Still, unless the jungle meta shifts so dramatically that it's like we're in lanes constantly, and he's just allowed to like play Nidalee the entire time, and it's just alternating between like counter jungling and being in every lane, which I don't see happening. And then the rest of this team is just like, are we throwing darts to see who's starting? Because we still have our
Three ADs,
our
three
three
support.
bot laners. We have our three supports, and now we added another top laner because the Shy, they finally decided that he's just too volatile. Or it's
That's
to
one word
get
for
him
it.
to be slightly less volatile, right? Like maybe it's another one of those things where it's like we have this guy behind you. I don't know. I never know with IG.
That's
The
the
one
magic.
point I can, yeah, no, the one point I can say in No Face favor is that I've actually seen him coach, kind of, or I've seen him interact with the team behind the scenes when I shadowed the Rock Staggers for a day. And he is very, like, one of the things when he was coming up in that initial LCK season with the Tigers is that he was very much not a standard top-down coach. And at the time, that was very weird for a South Korean team because he had a bunch of veteran players and they were kind of all over the place and they were very, I mean, you remember the Tigers. So, like, I do think having experienced that, he is not going to be a traditional top-down coach. Now, whether he's ready for the madhouse that is IG, who I joke around that they won a world championship with a coach in Mafa that just did drafts sometimes and played ARAMs with them and made sure no one killed each other. I don't know, but I think Nofe is a really interesting pickup to me, having seen him coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I can say players have very high opinions of him as well. Like, all the players that have worked with him. Remember, he also was on the EDG roster 2017, 2018 as well. And I've heard from like some of those guys that like, yeah, they think he's very good. Again, he's not like a top-down coach. He's very like open to hearing what the players want to do, and maybe that'll suit a player like the Shy a lot more than someone coming in and be like, hey, pick Ornn, and he's like, no, Fiora. Like, I don't think Nofe's gonna do that. So I think that's a good sign because, I think especially with like Korean players, they're never really gonna talk bad about a coach. But the fact that I've heard from Chinese players as well that like, no, like they really liked working with Nofe, I think is a really interesting sign for IG.
Yeah, it's exciting, right? And kind of round out IG. I just want to say that having someone behind the Shy is great. I've kind of been waiting for this. He griefed 2020. I don't know what that was, but that was disappointing. He did have a reasonably better split. Like, it still wasn't the Shy level.
It was still good.
It was
still definitely good.
It was good, right? But it's not like the levels of, I think, 2018, 2019 even, where the Shy spring, 2019 spring, I think was his best domestic split yet.
I feel like also, to be fair, like teams now know, right? Like the magic is gone because you look at interviews of like any LPL top laner, they all still say, right, he's the hardest player to lane against, like by far. So it's not like he's really gotten worse. And I feel like a lot of those habits that he's had have been there for a long time. But I don't know. I'm bringing you down a rabbit hole that you didn't mean to go down. So continue, sir.
No, I was just going to round it up by saying I hope that with, a very open mid lane champion pool. I didn't say it about Doomby before. That would be exciting. But about Rookie, I really hope that opens up Rookie. I hope that opens up people like the Shy as well if we do see top lane champion pool evolve as well.
He's spamming Gwen.
Well, that'll be exciting because that is open.
Gwen's so
Viego
fun.
Gwen. Yeah. A lot of mechanics, a lot of ramp. We got a massive page of bugs that will take a long time to read out through, but there's
so many YouTubers.
Get ready.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. IG, speaking of, will be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see how they perform. Let's move on to JDG. JDG's roster is Zoom, Kanavi, Yagal. We have LPC, Mystic, and Loken. 380 carries there. Mystic finished quarantine during playoffs, but did not play in spring. We also have Lumao there. Chashao and Vuso is the new coach on the roster as well. Who wants to start with JDG?
I'll go ahead. I think JDG is like still very similar strength. I think top lane Zoom is incredible. He was like, honestly, I might have ranked him like the best top laner in the LPL last split. He was really high up there, probably only behind Nuguri, honestly. And even in his matchup against RNG, he was winning a lot. But the problem for me in spring for JD Gaming was how quiet Luma was. And I think it had a lot to do with how cutthroat bot lane 2v2s were. It was, you make one mistake, Hella Blade's timing, and your bot lane's dead.
True.
So there wasn't a lot of roaming from Lumon. We got, I think it was his quietest split ever since 2018 when the team really formed up together. So for me, if the bot lane meta becomes a bit more mellow and you see more roam potentials, timings for him to come out, then this team is going to function a little bit better. Kanavi's going to have a better split as well. But without bot lane changes, then this is still going to be a team that is going to be very inconsistent out of the bottom side and still have Kanavi, who I think is... Kanavi's a weird type of player. I think if you look at Kanavi, he was a player that farmed heavily in a carry meta. He wasn't... So his performance actually dipped when the meta was supposedly in his favor, going almost like full clear. So, with the jungle actually opening up, Kanavi might be finding a little bit more success. Mainly still about how bot lane meta is shaping up.
I feel like JDG a really interesting team to me because they were a team I was decently high on towards the end of regular split. Then after the season, right, I remember like Kelsey was always so down on JDG. Like, this team is terrible. Like, was predicting them to lose. So I went back and rewatched some of the VODs before MSI started, and JDG just have so many like small things that they're not. I guess not even small. They have like a lot of like things that a team you would think would be good at when they're a top team. Their dragon setups are atrocious. The way they fight to get into river is actually really bad. They're horrible at like using side lane to try to like force a team out and come in through that direction. They pretty much just mindlessly try to force their way in to any objective, right? That they try to out team fight you when honestly, I feel like the only fantastic team fighting player on JDG is Zoom. I think Yagao, Kanavi, and Loken's positioning the split was all questionable at best. And to me, JDG at their best are a team that functions well when Lumao can, like get out of lane, like Loken and Lumao don't have problems. They're really good at setting up vision in the enemy jungle and then making those like cheeky plays where they're willing to wait around for like 20 or 30 seconds, play around enemy camp timers, and use numbers advantage to find a pick and turn that into something. So I think they're very good with early tempo with Lumao specifically. They're very good at finding picks. But I think almost every other area of the game, they're subpar for a top team, and Zoom is like the biggest band-aid in LPL history. That again, with like how good he is in lane, how good he is in team fighting, his teleports, it just kind of gets them through. So JDG are still a weird one to me, where I think the Zoom band-aid will still be enough to be a contender, but I kind of agree with Clement. I feel like their bot lane will always be a question mark, right? And heck, Mystic can start now, so maybe that can shore things up in a different direction. But at least from what I remember of Mystic, he was always much more of like a laning focused player.
Mhm.
So I don't know how that will like change the dynamic of JDG.
I also think that like Loken is one of those 80 carries that people are either like really, really high on and really, really down on without realizing that he's just very meta dependent, right? And I think actually a lot of these players are outside of Zoom are pretty meta dependent. Like Yagao and Kanavi's jungle mid is a bit weirder to me than other jungle mids because of the way that Yagao tries to play around Kanavi, and Kanavi doesn't always make that. He doesn't always translate that into any sort of map advantages.
He doesn't use
right?
it.
Yeah, so like then you have your mid laner who is already, in my opinion, I like Yagao a lot, but I think he's better on certain champions than others. So he's already meta dependent, and then he's also sacking some of his resources to make sure that Kanavi is in the enemy jungle or counter jungling or doing whatever he wants, but then that never seems to translate into better objective setups. So that I think is kind of a problem. And previously when JDG were winning, I think it's because they could find these picks that Yagao and Kanavi were just so good at. And at that point, that mid jungle really, really worked out well. And then Zoom is just honestly like a phenomenal player. Like he's so good. Like I feel like I always keep rambling about how good Zoom is in like every aspect of the game. But it cannot be said enough what an insane player Zoom is. So I mean, I also like the Lumao point that both of you guys brought up in that he really needs to be unlocked from lane, I think, in order for them to play around picks. And also to if he and Kanavi have really good synergy or any sort of like solid timing together, it really elevates the way that Kanavi looks as well, because then suddenly he's a lot more involved in what's going on and they can make some picks and get advantages from that. So that's another thing I'll be looking out for this team. I still think they're going to be towards the top of the table, though. Like they're the team, I guess, that I'm looking at, and like how I initially said BLG, like they're not going to be able to break into that like top 8, top 6 because there's just too many good teams ahead of them. JDG is the one like top 4, top 6 team that I'm looking at, and I'm like, maybe they could slip down depending on what the meta ends up being.
It is a mishmash of a team, in my opinion. It's one that I'm concerned about. You all bring up really valid points, and I think Zoom is, in a way, stuck in Elo hell. Definitely the best part of that team. For me, it's going to be questioning, because if we talk about unlocking Lumao in that lane, I mean, if Mystic was in the past, you know, we remember him on WE, he was a great team fighter. But that was the environment of Xie, of Mystic, you know, the WE at 2017 that got to the semifinals at Worlds. I really wonder how Mystic is going to slot into this team, because I would assume that if not starting, we are going to see him at least a couple times in the split, if not more than that. So to round that out, I would say that JDG, a lot of concerns there, and we have to see if Mystic is better for the team or maybe a hindrance. If anyone wants to finish off there, now is your chance.
Well, I will tell you this. I don't think Learmal is going to be playing Kog'Maw anymore on this team. I'm just saying, but I don't think it's going to happen because no one looks at the backline in this team. What is protecting the backline? That is an alien concept to JD Gaming.
Well, if it's
Or Mystic.
yeah, let's see how Mystic goes. On to LGD, a team that I was very hyped about in 2020. They will not be good for another 5 years, but we have to talk about them anyway. LGD have Fearless, who was Colt. His name changed to Fearless, so he's going to be better. Garvey's also on this squad. Quay in the jungle. We have Xie in mid. Kramer is your AD carry, and then it's Mark and Chance. So not only do we have Kramer still on LGD, Xie has rejoined, and people are upset that he's not on JDG to play with Mystic, but nevertheless, he's back on the squad with Kramer, and Mark has come away from BLG to join in as well. We have 3 out of the 5 members who went to Worlds with LGD in 2020. Somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who wants to start us off for LGD? Who feels passionate about this new LGD, old LGD?
I don't feel. I was gonna say I
Emily's
don't
yells
feel
were pretty
passionate.
That was passion, Emily. You got this.
All right, so
Let's
I'm glad
go.
that Shia is starting. Honestly, let's start there because I think he for some reason has gone to other teams, or like he's been on a bunch of teams now, and sometimes he really clicks with the team and he works super well with them, and then other times it's just for whatever reason he doesn't sync up with the jungler. He looks kind of lost in terms of how much, like, this is a mid laner that can just exert tremendous pressure, especially if he gets the resources from his team. So I think I'm just glad to see Shia starting. And I also like Mark a lot. Like when he was in a lane with Gala, I was actually more of a Mark fan than I was a Gala fan. I think he has some really good initiation sense at times, and so seeing him on this team again with this old LGD bot side is pretty interesting. I'm concerned about the top side of the map, and particularly, again, I know I keep harping on mid jungle, and it's because I think it's just really important to understand how you want to play your mid jungle. I don't think it's better or worse to have your mid play for your jungler, have your jungler play for your mid. I mean, obviously that changes via meta, but like if you feel more comfortable one way or the other, that's up to your team. But I don't know I don't know how this particular mid jungle is going to work, because like I said, Shia has been either he's looked really, really super good with his jungler, or he's looked really disconnected. So that's my biggest concern for this team, and that's not a reflection of how good of a player he is, because obviously I think he's a really strong player. But how well LGD can do are going to depend, I think, highly on that, and also how well Kramer Mark can do in the bot lane and contest 2v2s. I think, assuming that Mark is going to start, I'm fully assuming that Mark's going to start. So, I also think that LGD have another thing where, like, it's again, I'm looking at the team, I'm like, okay, they're going to have to pull a spring rare Atom run in order to have any sort of hope at contending, and that's just like really rare to watch. And also, you know, we saw RA's kind of weaknesses be immediately exposed in the IG series, and they still won because IG kind of shot themselves in the foot, and then they lost. So I still don't see this team it's going to be still really hard for them to get one of those 4 world slots. I think that's really, really far off, unless for some reason they synergize like insanely well right off the bat. I also keep being reminded that Amy is a coach, and every time I see it, it's hilarious to me because I remember him as a jungler and some of his decision making. But you know what? All the best to you, Coach Amy, and this LGD lineup. I'll be really happy if it does work out, just because I think very highly of Shea, and I always want to see him succeed. So
I feel
George
like
Clement?
this team to me is it's obviously definitely improved. I think everyone can know that just by
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of seeing the names on the roster. But to me, it's just a worse version of what they had in 2020, which is sad to say because I think both Mark and Shea are players that I'm not super high on either of them, but they both have like very clear like strengths that I like a lot. One thing about Mark, I think a lot of his engages are hit or miss, but Mark is fearless. He is always going to look for the engage. I think he's really
I
good
love
for a lot of
that.
teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just great. He's
That's
always
why I
going to
love
start it
him.
off. And even in terms of laning, like I think bot lane's still the weakest like roles we have in LPL. So I think Kramer and Mark are like an above average like laning duo. I still remember in 2020 when they just completely dismantled IG's bot lane, which let's be honest, that's not much of a feat, but they still did it consistently every game when they played them. So I think there's definitely some things to be excited there. Shea, I think she is very underwhelming in terms of laning phase, which I mean, you're comparing him to a bunch of monsters in the league. But one thing I love about Shea that I think him and Peanut did very differently than a lot of other mid jungles is right. There's a lot of different ways to like play around mid jungle, right? Like bringing your jungler mid, playing for like invades, playing for like roams the sides. They were one of the only mid jungle combos that actually like played for mid. And specifically like the TF Nidalee combo, Shea would always use TF and realize,
Yeah.
hey, I can actually set up ganks with this champion because I feel like we don't see anyone else in mid lane actually do that. So that was like a really nice pairing when he was with Peanut, someone who was much more lane oriented to where, I don't know, Quay's just not there yet, right? Needs more time, needs more experience. And then when we look to the top lane, I think is the most disappointing part, just for the fact that, right, we've seen Colt and Garvey now like so many times, and I feel like Colt has definitely improved. I think now he's going under the name Fearless, as it says in your nice prepared doc, Jake.
Thank you.
But yeah, problem is that both these guys are still going to be bottom tier LPL top laners. I don't expect we'll see Garvey, which kind of sucks because Garvey always had like that, like the hints of potential with how aggressively he'd play in lane and like the types of champions he'd play. But it seems like they are a lot more in line with using Colt, and Colt is more versatile in terms of the champions he could play. And yeah, the problem is I just don't see how this team could win because 2020 LGD was like, okay, we have this like really aggressive mid jungle setup that's
Yeah.
gonna like turn towards bot, and Shea had like the amazing Twisted Fate pick. He's great on really brawly assassins or skirmishy champions like Silas. And to me, that's how LGD will win. If Quay and Shea can have like really good mid jungle synergy, then I think this team could be competing for middle of the pack, or again, maybe a miracle run happens. But yeah, I don't think they have the firepower, and I don't necessarily think the pieces really align the way that this roster to highlight all the players' strengths.
I just want to say for LGD, I just don't know what this organization is trying to do because essentially what they did is they wasted 1 year. Like, what
Fair.
happened in after 2020 Worlds is they said that, hey, this roster, we made it to Worlds, that's pretty good, but it's like we all know that this roster is not developing any further. This has been a fluke. We got past WE. Yeah, good luck of the draw, and they blew up the roster immediately. And I actually felt like that was a good move. That was a decent move. You have to develop further rather than keep on paying what I assume would be pretty high salaries for the players that they had, all veteran players.
Yeah.
And now 1 year later, they are going back to something that is not going to be better than 2020 and is markedly worse. And I just feel like it's kind of a waste of time. I would actually prefer LGD just sticking with purely LDL roster and try to hit the
Sure.
jackpot that way
Yeah.
rather than just come up with something that's. Well, I think the question for this team is: are they going to make playoffs? I think that's the biggest question. And right now, looking at how stacked things are, maybe they can
If
they
it's
can
top
win
10
an LNG
is the maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're
Yeah.
assuming it's top 10 again, which it probably will be, then yeah, Clement, I like that. Maybe even. But if let's say it was a top 8 environment with 17 teams,
Yep.
I'd go a hard no. I could easily say that.
Just,
Yeah.
just to interject real quick, Clement makes a really good point that like It would have been really cool if LGD did just spend a bunch of money, replace like everyone, and do what they did last time, and they became this team that's like, we don't care about spring at all. We're just gonna pay massive buyouts or salaries for summer. But they like half index into both, right? They're like half
Yeah.
developmental, half like trying to win, and it's just kind of sad when a team doesn't just all in one direction or the other.
The question is like, why did you blow up the 2020 roster if this is what you're gonna end up in 2021
if you
summer?
were gonna end up,
That's
yeah.
it's for me. This really doesn't make any sense.
Because that roster could have gone
don't
so
know.
far. I mean, just talking about that 2020 roster. I mean, that could have done a lot and could have continued to develop, and we might be looking at a top 4 LPL team to contest. So,
It wasn't gonna develop, but
well, I
but
think
it would be solidly a playoff team.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely
that
it would be. Absolutely it would be. Let LGD fans down a little bit, but that's LGD. We'll keep moving on. More teams to talk about. We go next to LNG. LNG previously Snake, but it's been LNG for a while, so you should know. We have Ale, Mikuya is the top lane there still. Tarzan still in there. Icon still in there. Light and Iwandi, Rather and Martin. We remember Martin from the Vici days, of course. Everyone knows who Rather is as well, but this roster hasn't changed. LNG have kept the same roster. Now, if you're talking about teams, consistently or like setting out the tracks, I think LNG are like, well, we can set out the tracks of this team. We're going to try Tarzan for the full year, and Icon's going to stay in the mid. So who wants to open with LNG?
To me, this will be the team that BLG replaces in playoffs. This roster is not a roster that really excites me at all. I
Yep.
think Iwandi has potential. I think Light's
Mhm.
okay. Icon, though, is like past his prime. I think he's a very interesting player because he's kind of like an X factor in terms of like what he brings to a team. Because again, not an amazing laner, has a very small champion pool. I think not really phenomenal in any area. But Icon is so weird that he'll just have like one like highlight level moment every few games where again he'll like massive Orianna shockwave or if it was back when he was playing LeBlanc, like distortion multiple members, just delete them. So I think he's interesting, but again, I don't think he really has a place in the league. Their top lane is such a massive hole for this team. It's like, okay, we have a really strong jungler. I do think Tarzan played pretty well throughout the like the whole of spring split, but this team didn't even really have an identity. I remember when we had our meeting going into playoffs in spring, and it's like this team pretty much just would capitalize on enemy mistakes. The only lane they had that could get advantages on their own, and it wasn't even consistently, was bot lane. And Tarzan wasn't really a very lane-oriented jungler, but their laners also aren't laners that really play towards like pushing and moving for jungle. So it was like a very disconnected team that would only win if the enemy team was worse than you. And I think they'll be about the same, right? So for me, they'll probably finish around 10th through like 12th.
Yeah.
And they'll be better than the teams that are just fully developing because they have some decent players. But this team had no style, no strategy, no identity at all. And it sucks too, because again, they have some pieces that I think are really interesting.
Yeah,
I'm so negative, guys. I'm so
No, I
what am
mean,
doing?
I agree. Like, this is one of the teams that I just kind of have nothing to say about them, except that I think if you're looking at how things typically work in the LPL, maybe you're hoping that Iwandi gets picked up by an organization that's more towards the top that maybe needs a support. Maybe IG wants to try to force support and they go hit up LNG, but like this team is just very, I guess initially in spring, I was hoping that I would see them come together somehow and that Tarzan would kind of find a lane that he really wanted to play around or that he synced up with really well. And that just never happened, despite some pretty like solo good early games from him at times. So, I mean, it's weirdly not even the Tarzan show. It's like, oh, we obviously know Tarzan's still good and Iwandi is good sometimes. I do think he's a talent that other teams should be looking at. But yeah, it just feels like this team never came together and they don't really communicate with each other particularly well. So I'm sorry. I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything to say about them really.
Well, and I think again it just shows they're not really a team. And if anything, this is like a stat check team, right? If you have better players, like you're gonna beat LNG. I don't think it even matters how your teamwork is because LNG has no teamwork. If you have better
Yeah.
players in LNG, you will beat them. If you have some like form of teamwork and maybe even slightly worse players, you're gonna beat LNG. If you have worse players, if you have rookies, you're gonna lose to LNG. They're gonna stat check you. That at least is what we had from spring, right?
It's a
Maybe
nice
this time
threshold.
between splits, let them bring it together. But it's kind of a team that I feel like it'll be like a believe it when you see it kind of thing.
Yeah. Clement, do you want to close us up on this? Do you have any remaining thoughts?
I just want to say that this is a team that I think everyone wanted to see them go one way, but they ended up completely different. We wanted to see Tarzan and Icon crazy 2v2 the entire time, forget about team fight, forget about macro play. And what they actually did was they went pure macro, and they basically would pick weak side Gnar to make sure that you could never get tower dove. Mikuga was actually pretty good at that. And then light on Tristana to tower push. And that's how they got into playoffs. They got a bunch of early wins because people didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And they would play the tower trade against the Tristana and then realize, oh, wait a minute. They're taking Herald plus 2 towers top lane. We might have to rethink that trade. And that's pretty much how they got into playoffs. But I think their greatest disappointment is we didn't actually see Icon try to develop into that 2v2 mode. He just kind of sat there, played his Orianna a lot of the times, and was happy going into a team fight where they had no engage on the team. Like, I want he had some pretty good engages, but if you take out his Alistar, I think that was it. Like, the team just didn't know how to fight. And you saw in the playoffs, there's just like, it's time to lock and load, baby. Tarzan hard force Graves every game, and we're going to see him 1v9. And that was kind of their late game team fight strategy. So I just want to see, like, Icon get pushed to play with Tarzan, and even if they don't succeed, I still think this is a much more exciting team. So hopefully the meta will shape up for that to happen, and we get Tarzan and Icon.
Yeah, LNG definitely. I like calling them like a threshold team. You know, Lyric talking about them being a stat check team definitely feels like a nice way to round up LNG. Is because Rare Atom in spring what do we call them? We called them the benchmark, especially during playoffs. And they were a team that it was like, well, Rare Atom were like the team to beat to show that you're heading towards the upper echelon. For LNG, it's like the team to beat to show that you can potentially get into playoffs, right? Or at least knock LNG down a peg. Something to think about going forward is we're going to go to OMG as well. And OMG, a team that, look, if you weren't excited about LNG, I don't know how you're excited about this. We have New in the top lane. We have Aki in the jungle still. Crime, who has changed his name to Krem, which I'm assuming...
Terrible decision.
I'm just assuming
they
that...
should have kept it as Crime. What the heck?
Crime was so cool, but now is Krem. I don't know if it's with the fancy little E, but we've got Wooming also in the mid lane. We have Abel, Eric, Kane, Cold, and Bafeng. The bottom laners with support, excuse me. No Name and Bobo, the coaches. Does anyone get anything from OMG? I mean, they were not a good roster in spring.
No.
Abel.
There's one thing I'm excited about. I gotta say real quick. I don't care about this team at all. No, not even Abel. I'm gonna keep calling him Crime because this guy pretty much only plays assassins. Plays Echo, plays LeBlanc, plays Zed. He's gonna bring out the Yone. Like he plays it all. He doesn't care if it's meta or not, and I'm so excited to see that in the league. And it feels like it's a time for that, like I was saying, right? Mid lane meta apparently is wide open, and this guy was like the best player by far on like the 18th best team in the LDL. So I don't know if he'll start over Wooming because I actually feel like Wooming has had a lot of like decent Wooming has typically been to me that player that was like a little bit elo held, that he's shown potential in my opinion, but his teammates are just too bad. But I don't care about Wooming anymore. Put this guy in, give me like a highlight reel. That's all I want because this roster won't do anything else.
I'm really happy that they only have one top laner now. In Spring Split, they had 4 top laners, and they were all terrible. So
yeah.
at least they have decided.
Now they just have the one.
Just the one.
I will say,
terrible.
This team is, when they actually are in motion, they actually look pretty good. If you only look at the roam squad of Aki and Cold, it actually looks really, really nice. The problem with this team is that they actually had no carry. Like, this was a team where you had 2 roamers that could facilitate, make plays, and then they hit the team fights, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Who's gonna do it?
Why couldn't we just keep to the skirmish? So, Abel for me is really interesting, because you know, this guy has always been someone who's able to hard carry. He's really, really high rank on Korean ladder, and you know, was always a bit of an innovator. Actually brought us season 7 meta. So I'm not sure how much credit you want to give him as an innovator, but the the fun thing is, I think that now they actually have a carry to play around, and you know, top lane's still going to be a dump. That's why they're always going to be really low on the roster, in the ranking. But with the lane to actually play around, I'm actually slightly excited. I think this is a team that is going to be solidly above the rest of the dump that we have at the bottom of the LPL. We basically had 5 teams that didn't do anything. Now I think we're gonna have V5 join that roster, and OMG is gonna be like at the top of the dump.
Better than the
They're not gonna
dump.
be out of the dumpster, but they're gonna be at the top. You know.
So are they in the
Their
recycling bin
heads
yet,
are
Clement?
their heads are peeking out of the dumpster. Or
Yeah, they're like the strata that, you know, the raccoons can still feast on. They don't really have to dig too deep. So yeah, they're kind of like topsoil. That's what they are.
Oh, nice.
nice.
Everyone loves topsoil. Great. Well, that's at least they're not in the dump, Clement. That's great. Does anyone else want to round out OMG?
You know, I don't really have anything else to add, but
Please.
I think Clement made a really good point that it's very interesting that Cold kind of made like a resurgence a little bit last split, because you know, before that, like the numerous seasons before, Cold has been like one of the most dead weight players we've had in the LPL. And again, like it's so weird that bringing in Aki, it feels like really rejuvenated Cold. And I really loved how aggressive they were. Again, it didn't work out obviously, but there's some players, Cold, Aki, I think Chocho as well from, you know, RW, that like some players just play so aggressively and like show that fearlessness that it's hard not to just get behind them. So I kind of hope Cold can, you know, keep that going. And yeah, I kind of agree with Clement. I think this team has like some potential to, you know, be the hobo king of the dumpster.
It's a team I would watch.
God.
I don't expect them to do well, but I would willingly watch them.
Do you know, someone in chat called them the lid, and I like that from Oreo
lid?
Cupcake. The
The
lid
lid
for
of
the
the
dumpster.
dumpster. Nice.
That's nice. So
Okay.
shout out to Oreo Cupcake for that one. For OMG, I just want to say I casted the most games out of anyone of OMG last split. Like,
I remember that.
and
actually.
every time, like, I got tilted a little bit because I watched them and I saw the potential. But towards the end of the split, when I watched OMG's or casted OMG's final series, I was like, I remember, I think the call was, why didn't you play like this all series long? Like, they actually looked like they had a lot of potential. So I'm hoping we see that from OMG. They're actually a squad that, having casted so many times, I'm hoping get a little bit better in summer. Let's move forward. We're going into Rare Atom territory now. In Rare Atom, we have
The
Cube.
boys.
We have Ixler, Yan, the surprising boys with Fofo. Iboy, Hung, and Maestro. This roster has not changed. We still have Lung, and we have Endless on that roster as well. Who wants to open with Rare Atom? Because I was wrong about this squad. I said it many times. I did not think this squad was good. They improved a bit, but surprisingly, they made it into playoffs and they made it to round 2.
I think did not think they were good is also like, I think a lot of Rare Atom. So I actually enjoyed watching Rare Atom because I think Loyan is incredibly entertaining. He doesn't always make the best decisions or pick. You know, he has his like weird stable of champions as well, but I feel like he's always interesting to watch, and that is enough for me in terms of a jungler who is gonna maybe do something different, maybe do a funky path. It might not be the most efficient thing, but it'll be interesting, and I appreciate that. I also think Fofo is just obviously a really, really good mid laner, and that allowed Loyan to get away with a lot of the things that he did. So this is a really weird and interesting team to me because you have 2 players in particular, in my opinion, in Loyan and Iboy, who are willing to take massive risks, despite the fact that it might not always pay off. And a lot of their resurgence was due to playing a lot of teams that were ended up below them or were already below them in the standings towards the back half of their split. So because they were able to kind of chew their way through those teams, and then IG, like, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I think that series is more of an IG loss than a
Yes.
Rare Atom win.
Absolutely.
But I don't know how I feel about Rare Atom. I think we're probably going to see them fall a bit, honestly. unless it is an insane meta where Loyan can again pick some of the champions that he does like to play that might be a little off kilter, and also Fofo if mid lane is opening up. I'm curious to see how Fofo will respond to that. Not because I think he's bad or that he'll have like a massive drop off, but if enemy mid laners can skill check him a bit more, maybe pick some counter matchups, that will basically, in my opinion, destabilize the entirety of the map for this team. Because I think they get away with a lot because Fofo will have laning advantages, or Fofo will, have Zoe and Roam or whatever. And I think that gave them a lot of leeway in spring that I don't necessarily think they will get away with in summer.
Very fair. Lyric Clement.
I think this team was very interesting to me. And it was probably the team I watched the most of going into playoffs last split, because I was with, Jake, I was like in the same camp as you, that I just couldn't believe this team was winning.
Yeah.
And I find them very interesting because I think individually they have very strong pieces. I think they're one of the best like laning teams holistically in the LPL, which is why like Emily said, I feel like they got away with a lot because Lil Yen, sadly we actually don't have a jungle proximity stat in the LPL, but I'm sure Lil Yen's would be one of like the lowest with all of his laners. He would typically solo invade a lot. He would take dragon solo quite a bit. Rift
He's
Herald would maybe
ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's absolutely ridiculous.
He just kind of goes where he pleases, but he has that luxury because all three of his laners are solid. But even in terms of like the laners themselves, this team doesn't really transfer pressure from lane to lane much. Like Hung and iBoy don't really move. Fofo didn't really move outside of when he was on Zoe. Cube is not the type of top laner like Azuma or Flandre who's going to kind of like hover around mid and try to maybe play with Fog of War. So that's why I remember I called them the counterpunch team, and why I actually predicted them to beat IG, because to me, this team will do very well if they're playing like a hyper aggressive team, because they do have like good players, but they don't actually set anything up for themselves. And anything they do set up for themselves, they do very like individualistically. So they're a team that I think will finish about the same. Like they'll be 8th through 10th, right? But yeah, I think the meta could really hurt them, like Emily was saying. And to be fair, though, there's really nowhere to go but up, in my opinion, for them in terms of like improvement, because it's like, hey, you have the good players now. We just kind of need to see you like learn some of these macro elements of, again, transferring pressure, setting up dragons, maybe playing around side, like whatever it is, whatever they want to index into. I feel like anything will make them a bit of a better team. But yeah, Fofo especially, I think, was definitely a top 2 mid laner in spring. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he pans out, because again, the meta didn't really suit a lot of these crazy playmaking mids, like, the rookies, the knights, eventually people like Mole falling out of favor with the meta as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But Fofo did come into his career as like a LeBlanc one trick. So, that's kind of exciting as well.
I definitely think that Rare Atom is a team that is still going to be solidly in the playoffs. It's very, very strong. Their problem for me was mainly around, they had a very slow early game. They didn't really do much in the early phases of the game. They waited out late, and they kind of just overpowered you with late game carries. Like iBoy was on something really good. Fofo was usually on a 0 Orianna. And then you had really good piece players. Like I felt like Hong and Cube are extremely underrated. They're not full spectrum players. Like they won't lane against the top of the league very well. But when you talk about engages and picking people off in a Drake fight setup, they were actually very, very good at their jobs. So Rare Atom was a team that could often like catch higher teams off guard with their Drake setups and actually just kind of power through at some points. So they were a team to me that, if they can tighten up the screws, find more action early game like Jordan was talking about, and throw a little bit less in the late game, where they actually did throw quite a bit. I feel like iBoy is always going to be iBoy. And Lillian to me was also such a coin flip player in team fights.
Yes.
It was actually insane to watch him sometimes get like last hits off and get a kill, or just die instantly. So if they can tone down, I think, their late game aggressiveness and move it into the early game, I actually really like watching this team. There's a lot of players I really enjoy just watching them lane and do things on the map. Cube for me is underrated. Hong is
They're
really
all good,
underrated.
right, man? They're all good players. Like it's one of the many
Yeah.
rosters you look at and you're like, there's really no like true weak link on this team, which is always just so exciting in a region like LPL where like individual talent is so like put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I like just to hone this around that Fofo's was the first part of a lot of you talking with your discussion as well. I want to highlight that, I didn't really see Fofo till the end of the split when you colorcasters of the league were talking a lot about this mid laner and how good he was. Sitting up in the top 2, especially for rankings. To round out Rare Adam as well, I'm still skeptical going into summer, but yeah, if we have a top 10, I expect Rare Adam to be there, right? Would it be anyone's upset if Rare Adam were not there? Like, is there anyone in this call that thinks Rare Adam won't be making playoffs, or is that like an expectation we all have?
No, it's an expectation. I'd be shocked if they fall out of playoff contention, actually, just because, like we've all reiterated, they have good enough players to just, eventually skill check their opponents. So, like, when you have that, when you have such strong laners, you are going to get so far in LPL.
Moving forward, and I just want to, before we do, Lyric, I want to say one thing, and that is, I don't think we've seen Maestro since he solo killed Jungler as Nautilus in 2019 or 2020.
No,
they've done him dirty. Emily, I don't remember if you remember this. Clement, you as well. He, over the wall, it was a blast code or something against Nautilus. He solo killed Jungle.
He solo killed Junja, I think it was. It was great, dude. It was amazing.
Oh,
we haven't seen him since. I feel like he's robbed. I want to see Maestro in this split. Onward to Rogue Warriors. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams left to go. I will try and push through. Rogue Warriors have changed up their roster, and what a fiesta it will be. We have 8917 in the top lane. We have Ice Coke, which is a banger name, alongside Haro in the jungle. We have Forge mid still, Betty and Jung Wooji still there, and we still have Kai Xuan and Chocho. Also in support, Incense is one of the coaches from what I could gather. Rogue Warriors were our worst team in spring. Who wants it?
I just say this is probably going to be developmental. Like, it's just wait and see.
Like, I actually feel pretty passionately about this team because I'm just so tired of like Haro being stuck. Like Haro deserves to be on a good team. Like I'm so tired of him not being on it. It's so sad. This is 100% a bottom 2 team this split. Them or V5 are going to be the worst team. The question is who can carry harder. Haro and maybe Jung Wooji if he actually gets to play again, or when we get to V5 Kepler and Uniboy. But 8917, formerly known as Leaky, played in the LMS before. He played on Alpha Esports and HQ. He's a player that I think had potential. People might not know, but he's the player that eventually ended up, they benched Ziv for him. His champion pool is very dynamic. Early in his career, he was all about tanks. Lately, in these more recent years, he's much more of like a bruiser and carry-oriented top laner, which I think could be good, but again, we've only seen him play in LDL where he didn't really perform that well, and in LMS and PCS where all the good talent was already gone. So I don't have too high hopes for him. I don't really know much about this Ice Coke guy. He does have a pretty cool name, but if Haro's not starting, it's not going to be for performance issues. It'll be something else with team dynamic or issues. Forge is a player I've been against ever since he's played in the LPL. I just don't think he's good. I think his laning phase has actually consistently been one of the worst in the LPL. I've watched some of his pro views, and like some of his wave management and trading is just so like he plays every champion like he's Irelia, and like he always has his jungler right next to him. And it's like, well, when he actually does have his jungler and he actually is playing Irelia, that's gonna work out. But
it's like walking your kid through like Woolworths or the equivalent. You go to Trader Joe's or a candy store, and when you take their eyes off them, then they're gone. You're like, oh shit, what is he doing? Oh yeah, could be
I will say, if Jung Wooji and Chocho play, I'm kind of excited for that bot lane. Again, I know Chocho's not good. I know Chocho's not a good laner, but he really has that like Bao Lan effect to me where you can tell he's the shot caller of that team 100%. The way he just like runs it down into the enemy team and like coin flips every play. I loved watching it. I loved when he was on the roster last split. And yeah, he's fearless. He's a shot caller. And Jung Wooji, I still think is good. When they ended up like taking him off the roster last split, it was very weird to me because it's like Jung Wooji's not a bad player, decent laner, great in team fights. So sucks for Betty, but This team needs a carry. Betty's not going to be the carry. Zhang Wuji is the man that we need. That's my spiel on Rogue Warriors. Thank you.
Anyone else want to take
Still bottom two.
RW action before we move? Emily, do you want to say anything about RW that hasn't been said?
I would love to see like Changwuji on like you know how we all saw Gala's Kog'Maw at MSI and we're like, Jesus, this spacing on Kog'Maw is actually just insane. Like, I would love to have a carry meta, like have those insane hyper carries and have them just play Changwuji every game. Because I would just love to watch his spacing as an AD carry. He's so like I'm really curious actually as to why he hasn't been picked up by a team higher in the standings looking for an ADC because I do think he's incredibly talented.
Yeah. Agree with that. I'm going to move on from RW because it's not going to get any better from here if we continue on. Let's go into a roster that deserves a lot of credit. That is quite exciting to see some new names on. Yes, we know RNG, the best team in the world right now. Okay, all right, it's actually not even a stretch. We have Xiaohu in the top lane. We have Shu, Clement. How do you say U in Chinese? Is it Shu? It's not Shu, is it?
It could be a lot of different pronunciations. I'm checking now.
So we have Xiaohu, and
for
now I'm gonna say Shu, which is little something.
Xiao Shu.
Okay.
It's the second tone.
Okay. We have Wei and Lovely. We have I wasn't gonna go back to the name. Just my Chinese is so bad right now. We have Krine. We have Gala. We have Ming and Tabe and Poppy still on the team. RNG, I think, surprised me a lot at MSI. I was expecting Dumb to win, in all honesty, but RNG, as soon as they got to MSI and started playing, I thought, wow, actually, maybe this is the best team there. So, Jordan, do you want to open on RNG? Any thoughts? I know you were there. You casted the semi-final. You were there on the desk.
Woo!
Actually, all you guys were on the desk.
That's true.
I was on the desk for the other semifinal.
We were all
you guys
MSI
are repping.
Attendance.
I'm honored to have you all here.
I feel like, I'll be honest, aren't you going to be one of the teams I have the least to say about just for the fact that like they're such a known quality? We all expect them to be championship contenders again, but I just want to hit on one aspect that Emily talked about earlier that I got really scared during MSI because they over-indexed in the side lane so much. I think especially at MSI when you saw them have to win 2 games with base races, I was like, okay, you know, I know RNG is a good team fighting team. I know RNG can play proactive in the early game. We know that they can like play this roam heavy style with top. Like there's different dimensions to RNG that for some reason they just weren't showing like the whole first part of MSI and really still almost didn't show at all. That I thought, okay, are they maybe just getting like rammed in scrims playing every other way that they need to be like, let's avoid fights, let's pick Twisted Fate, let's pick Rise, let's pick Silas, let's avoid like team fights at all costs, let's avoid any type of early action at all costs. We need to win through being smarter because that was a bit scary. Luckily in the end, we saw that that's not the case. RNG can still pick great team fighting, like compositions. They can go for these more early game lane centric. We finally saw Krine have like a stand up performance, picked up the Lucian, so that's also a flex pick for RNG. So yeah, I feel like MSI was a bit of a scare early on, but overall this is still the team that we know and love. I don't expect anything to change going into summer in terms of, you know, how they play the game with, again, over-indexing the side lanes, kind of having more dimensions to play around. Maybe someone else I'm sure is going to talk about Gala because the fact that he's still popping off blows my mind with how low we all were on him in spring.
I'll talk about Gala. Yeah.
I'll let you take it away then.
All right. So apparently I owe Gala an apology. I even tweeted one of the days I think I was actually on the desk for Rumble stage. I was like, I'm sorry, Gala, I'll never flame you again, but not really. Don't hold me to this. Because I actually don't think Gala's bad. I've never thought he's bad, but I did not think he was as good as he appeared because of A, the way that they really focused on picking his champions, and also B, just some of his mistakes that he made during the regular season. I thought he showed significant improvement in playoffs. And then again at MSI, he performed at about the level that he was during LPL playoffs, if not better. So I pointed out that Kog'Maw game earlier because I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, this guy actually is or can be like incredibly good, right? Because I hadn't seen him on much of anything outside of the Kai'Sa or Tristana. So when he's always getting his top champions, obviously that's going to narrow my focus on what he can do. So I'm really glad I got to see that Kog'Maw game actually and some of his team fighting in it, because I thought he was that was actually the most impressed I've been with Gala's like individual mechanics. And it gives me a lot of hope towards him continuing to grow as a player with RNG, especially with a lane partner like Ming, who I feel very strongly about him getting robbed several times in LPL
Yep.
for MVPs and also at MSI. So
At MSI Finals! I was like, it happened again!
Congratulations to Gala, but also, I mean, he has a phenomenal laning partner, right? So, my big thing with RNG is, to echo some of the things that Jordan said, I really want to see them continue to evolve as a team to show different dimensions. I know that they play side lanes really well. I think they play side lanes better than any other team I can think of in the world right now, to be honest. But I also think that means that it sometimes comes at a cost, especially for Cryan, and it's hard to tell whether whether they're like, okay, Cryan, we're going to put you on these certain champions and we're going to play towards side lanes, or whether, and we're not going to focus on having mid be a super important control point outside of that Lucian game, or whether Cryan is just uncomfortable with playing that kind of like really stable, we always have the wave pushing in mid so that Wei can kind of do whatever he wants. So I don't know that, and that's a thing that only RNG knows the answer to, but it's something I'll be watching out for in summer, because I still think that we definitely have not seen like the full potential of what this team could be, and that's actually super exciting.
It's exciting and scary
to see a good team, to see a good team and realize that they could still very visibly improve in certain areas is really cool.
And I'll say it, Clement, before I ask for your opinion, that I feel like, with four spots for World, if RNG do not get the first or second seed, let alone, a World spot, I would be, pants are down. Clement, would you like to finish us off, round us out with RNG?
Not sure what the pants are down saying comes from.
Caught with your pants down, Clement.
I don't think pants, I've never heard pants are down.
I would be surprised to make it a bit more
It definitely
PG,
sounds like an Australian thing, but this team, I almost feel like they were more challenged domestically than they were internationally, to be honest. Like, if you look at the LPL, the question for RNG is, are they going to be able to get over FPX and Top Esports? I think those were the two teams that realistically could have beat them in playoffs. All of them went down to basically the wire. They base race against Top Esports, and they should have lost against FPX both times. So that's where I'm kind of looking at whether this team can come over. And domestically, you're looking at the threats of basically Nuggery, and also an incredibly strong laning phase coming out of Top Esports bot lane, if they manage to string that together. Like, that is kind of how Top Esports got their sort of early game leads, even though they lost the game in the end, but they had a very, very strong bot lane 2v2 in that scenario. So if they can kind of shore up this is a team that has a very, very high caliber, but if they can shore up bot lane 2v2 and find a way to negate Nuggery, I think they're still guaranteed to go through into the semifinals and be a very, very strong presence here. But
and then they
the bot lane thing does worry me just a little bit. They didn't have a great showing against even the PSG bot lane, so I kind of want to see them be more dominant there and have more games where they switch it up and go for a bot lane focused strategy like old RNG. That was not the common case for them in most of spring. They only did that against FBX because they were getting nothing out of Nuggery, so you have to go bot lane.
True.
So I think that's my big watching point for summer is Crying champion pool, and can they have more games in bot lane 2v2 where they actually just win out from bot?
I actually want to echo on that as well, right? Because we've hit on a few times again about if mid lane, like champion pool opens up, especially if we get more early aggressive champions. We already see that RNG have to ban Zoe every single game. So What's that going to be when we have a bunch more champions that, again, do really well in laning phase, can roam early, that Cryin can't play? Because that will be a massive point of punishment, especially then if the meta keeps going towards, if we do get more like jungle in lane meta where, right, even though we did see on Estar that I think Wei and Cryin had like pretty good synergy early on that roster when Cryin was playing Pantheon, he was playing Rumble, he was just constantly moving towards bot side with Wei, but we haven't seen that since on RNG, and I think that'll be a big question mark. If the meta changes, will this team still be good? I think that's something we all have to wait and see.
So meta dependent to round out for RNG, but still one of the best teams in the LPL. I'm not going to ask you to just tell me if they're number one or not, because I think coming into the meta, we'll find out who it suits. I also liked it with the discussion. What we saw was like Cryin really elevated towards MSI. Cryin played, one of his best tournaments. I think we saw the best out of Cryin there. In the LPL, we have very good mid laners, and if people like Knight and Rookie are getting back to form after their pretty subpar split, then, he's got a lot more competition domestically than he did at MSI. So, moving forward, RNG, congratulations to them going into summer. Let's see if they can continue the course. And all they have to do, if they get quarterfinals or semifinals, they'll be guaranteed for Worlds no matter what. So, it feels like a pretty easy path for them. Let's go into the next team. Another exciting one. We have Suning, who we know with the change in Sword Art kind of lost a bit of momentum, but the roster has been in the top lane. SOFM, now the only jungler in their view, is not on the sub, which is quite interesting. Angel's still the only mid laner. We have Assam with Huanfeng in as an AD carry. Now, I don't know if it's Assam or Assume. Either way, he's the AD carry along with Huanfeng. We have On down there and DN and Fury, previously from Suning, we also remember too. So Suning is that roster that, I was pleasantly surprised by. I think with Sword Art, I put them down like 10th, 9th or 10th. They finished 6th, I think, in playoffs, or at least towards the end of the regular season anyway. But Suning, they got better. Who wants to open with Suning? Feel free. Clement.
This is a team that has a bunch of carries, but no solid engage. It's really infuriating watching this team because it's incredibly slow. And honestly, I don't think they should have made it that far into playoffs. They had a good matchup against WE, and Angel's KDA was 30, and Shanks was 0.6. So they had a massive mid gap, and that's how they kind of powered through the playoffs and got their positioning. But I think that the problem with this team is that they're essentially still heavily reliant on Angel to either faceplant on something like Kassadin or Silas, or play a Twisted Fate, or they're waiting on to develop. And until those two conditions are met, they're going to be solidly kind of a gatekeeper team. They'll be very, very strong just because of how good their carries are, but they're not going to be proactive on the map. And faster teams are going to run past them. Late game, better team fighting teams with better engage pieces are going to pick the spots and dismantle them as well. So they're either gated by champion picks from mid, or they're gated by how fast On can actually develop.
Yeah, the big question for me was whether Suning were going to pick up another support. Not that On isn't improving, but like in the current meta, and I don't know if this will remain true, but in a meta where you have a lot of the AP junglers that we have seen people playing, you need to get hard engage from somewhere else, and typically it hasn't been mid, given the pool of 80 mids that we have. So you then have Bin, who is going to typically play something where he's going to be contesting the wave super, super early, like an insane person. Which basically, my point in all this is that it leaves most of the engage to On, right? And we've seen him, kind of struggle with that role. I think he's grown into it a little bit more as the season went on, but no pun intended. But because, you have this one point of engage or initiation or like guaranteed CC coming out of this team, it's really difficult, right? Given the rest of what Suning wants to do. I think SOFM is always going to be a super interesting jungler for me to watch, but he's also not going to be someone, even in a different jungle meta, that I'm going to be relying on to have a really strong like hard engage. For me, he's always going to be, how can I path to maximize my own efficiency to
Oh, God.
be as strong as I can. Maybe I'm doing Raptors when I should be with my team fighting, or maybe they shouldn't be fighting while I'm doing Raptors. So because SOFM, I love SOFM, by the way. This is not, I'm not
He's
throwing
great.
shade his way
Most
because
entertaining
he's like
player.
that. Again, it just puts a lot of pressure on, right? Because you're looking at all four other players and you're not going to have engage coming out of them. And the way that the game is set up right now, that actually, is pretty difficult if he is not coordinating his initiation with the rest of the team.
I just want to interject
Yeah.
quickly before I hand it off and just say I have never been more excited to commentate and watch a player than SOFM on that point.
He's so entertaining.
I'll never forget two moments. The first moment, the least in game where you're right, he was doing Krugs on the enemy bot side. He was invading while Inhibitor was getting taken. They were going for the Nexus and SOFM was still farming. And of course, the teleport Kane that we saw in the last split as well was just teleport smite Kane. The bot gank was beautiful. Sorry, Lyric, I cut you off. It's on to you.
I mean, I honestly feel like Clement and Emily both pretty much nailed everything down about this team, but I think especially the point Emily made about SOFM not being an engager, it's very telling. If the next time SOFM plays Gragas, I just want everyone to really pay attention because the way he plays it is so funny because he plays it like it's like a cleanup, like assassin sort of champion, or he's like angling for like the perfect target, which
His ult.
yeah, typically it kind of works out for suiting, but again, he does not fulfill an engaged role at all. And the only other point I want to make on kind of building off what both of them said is kind of how gimmicky they got in playoffs to pick up their wins. The mid lane champions that Angel played in playoffs were Silas, Seraphine, Kassadin, Zillion, and TF. And that's it. That's all of them throughout the 3 series they played. Half of the games on was playing Tom Kench. This team needed to do wonky things to pull off wins. I think that's also kind of a good sign for their coaching staff that they were at least very like introspective and realized like, hey, we're not good at a lot of these aspects. We need to like kind of all in on our strengths, put SOFM on Zinzao, put SOFM on Kane, and it worked out. So, I think this team will still be in playoffs. Like kind of both of them said that they have good enough players, but yeah, this team's gonna need time, or they're gonna need like a completely different meta. I can't even tell you what kind of meta they would need, but they're gonna need something a bit crazy.
True.
I
I'm
just want to add
please.
one fun point to this, but like the best stat from SOFM is his first tower percentage participation rate. It is 17%. It's half the amount of like this person that's above him. And what this means that he's done the calculations. He knows if he helps you push a tower, you're gonna be splitting that tower plate 3 ways. So he paths directly past the tower into the enemy Krugs. Always. And
Love him
that is
so much.
SOFM in a nutshell. It's so funny. Because everyone else is either like 40, 50%. The second lowest is 30%. And he's like, nah, 17%. I'm never touching that
17%.
tower. Let's go.
Live your truth, SOFM. Live your truth.
That's so great. I mean, he's such a character again. Most entertaining player to watch in the LPL. I love that stat. Thank you, Clement. We're moving forward, ladies and gentlemen. We have about 5 teams left remaining. We now move on to WE, who I am really excited about this roster. Lyric will be starting this, by the way, just because he does have agency on one of these players. We go to the top lane. We have Breathe up there. We have Bei Sheng in the jungle. In the mid lane, Teacher Ma technically on the roster. Shank's on the roster as well. But Mole is the mid laner who's moved on over. We have Jolmung who's changed his name to Elk in the bottom lane. Also a new player called Stay who's come up from the LDL. Missing is your support with Assassin and Chang'an as the coaches. Lyric, I gave you agency because your man is on WE now. And Mole is such an upgrade to this roster, if I may say so myself.
And I've clearly always talked on broadcast like that I love Mole, but I don't know if I've ever said why I love Mole, but Mole to me just reminds me a lot of like how Xiaohu played in 2019, which I love 2019 RNG. Like the way like Xiaohu and Karsa played, it's like he's very good in lane. Obviously, there's certain champions is like S+ tier on, but I even think he's one of those players that anything he pulls out, like Mole is pretty decent on. He's very selfless, despite the fact that he's a great laner. I think it was like top 3 in solo kills in terms of mid laners.
Yep.
So he's very good at playing for his jungler, very good at playing for his side laners. He's not someone who's going to like give up waves needlessly to roam, but he knows like which waves of, okay, I can fall behind 6 CS here because like the value of this play on bot or in jungle is going to add so much more. I think he's just very versatile, and also stand by, I think Mole's the top 5 mid laner in the LPL. I think this is a massive upgrade for WE. The sad thing is, at the start of the year, I said it was the year of the Mole. I said they were winning worlds. I said, China was adding that to the Zodiac. Problem is, I don't know if I have a lot of faith in the bot lane. I think Missing had a pretty bad
I think it was
team
his worst split.
It actually, they got better as the split went on, but I remember the first half of the split, these guys were getting 2v2 killed left and right. Like pretty much every series. To be fair, a lot of series they were finding 2v2 kills themselves, but typically their waves would end up in a horrible position, or like they'd still fall behind elsewhere to where, I don't feel like WE's system really sets up Breathe to be a big carry, despite the fact that he can be. It's like Breathe over Morgan was a great upgrade because Breathe is a better player, but we don't actually see WE really play around Breathe. So to me, WE's still a team that's kind of like mid jungle or jungle into bot for late game team fighting or bust. And the problem is, like, I don't really know if I have faith in we got to start calling him Elk. So Elk now to show up, and their sub stay is relatively untested. Actually, I don't even know if he's actually okay. So he has actually played. I was reading that he's only played one split. So only played one split in LDL. Apparently
right.
not rated very highly by people who do watch LDL. So I'm not sure what this move is, if it's another one that we talked about earlier of like trying to light a fire under another player or what. But yeah, this team is question marks. But this team, in my opinion, has the highest upside. If their bot lane plays well, I think this team can and will potentially be competing for a world slot. And I love Mole.
Nice,
So
strong start.
on the other side of that, I love Beishong. He's been one of my favorite junglers. I've been really open about this. Especially in the meta that was at the beginning of the year, where it was heavily reliant on your jungler to be a carry in team fights, and some junglers have better team fight positioning than others. And I thought Beishong's team fight positioning was incredibly good, like to the point where I was surprised that it was that good. Like because at some points on Graves, it just looked like he was an AD carry, basically. That's how good his positioning was. So I think that I really love the addition of Mole because I really want the Peishang Mole combination to work out for both of these players, because I think if these two players can work in harmony together, this team can be insanely good. And obviously the caveat is then the bot lane. And the caveat is also kind of, as you can infer from the way I just described Peishong, is that WE did take a little bit of a dip mid-season. Part of that, I think, was due to some bot lane performance, but part of that was obviously Shanks still growing into his role and kind of struggling. But another part of that was that as the meta shifted away from carries, where Peishong was, doing full clears, but then contributing as a carry in team fights on things like Graves, to more like full clear chem tank, he just didn't look as good. So again, if it is a meta where we have some picks that are getting involved with lanes earlier, I'm also curious to see that from him. I think he's adaptable enough, but obviously how strong of a jungler he will be would remain to be seen. I think that's where Mole could really, really help him out, actually, because if you remember previously when WE was kind of having issues, they had Teacher Ma as a stopgap, and Teacher Ma, while he has issues, he was a mid laner that would play a lot more for his jungler and a lot more for his side lanes. So we'll see. Obviously, Mole is like a massive upgrade, and that's why I'm really, really looking forward to watching this team. And then hopefully it's a bot lane meta where their bot lane 2v2 can at least not get completely shoved in, which I think is the main issue. Yeah, like or just flat out, yeah, solo kill. There were some times where they would be like contesting and the enemy bot lane would just wipe them, and I was just like,
It was a real rough time
rough.
for Joe Monk. Yeah, I mean, I've seen him develop, and I talk a lot about players developing, but that wasn't the greatest. I'm really upset because I thought Missing was it was either 2020 spring or it was in late 2019 where I thought Missing was one of the best supports. Especially
2020 spring.
2020 spring, right? Playmaking champions. Like we saw his Thresh, he was the best Thresh, and ironically did not miss. I'm really disappointed in this split, and I hope he recovers. Clement, your thoughts on WE, because this is, I think, one of the most exciting roster changes for the offseason.
It started off by saying that if they have Mole, I think they get past Sunny. And I think they get past Sunny actually quite easily.
Okay.
The thing about WE is they actually have a lot of early game action going on. Beishang is great at creating kills. They play a lot of times top lane centric, where they roam Missing, Beishang, and Breathe up. And, Breathe is very consistently winning his lane. So they have great Herald control, great early kills. And where I think that they had some of their problems was when their bot lane was losing, they couldn't put their bot lane mid. Like, that would be sharing EXP between them and Shanks. And now they have Mole, someone who can play a side laner, can be on something like just a Rise and play split push. That actually soothes over a lot of their bad early games. Because now if your bot lane's losing, you just drop them mid, you put Mole into a side lane, and then you have a 1-3-1. So a lot of times when I'm evaluating teams and rosters, I'm looking at what sort of an archetype can they actually play towards. I think they keep their archetype of playing late game intact, and now they have an actual 1-3-1. When they had Breathe, 1-4 doesn't really exist in the meta, but now when they have Mole, that just opens up a huge potential for them. They're not going to be cornered by Suning, forcing them into 2v2s that they can't take anymore. So this is a team for me that is going to be solidly knocking on top 4. I think they're probably 5th place for me in the roster right now, and I'd even be willing to put them slightly above JD Gaming. And they're kind of like knocking on the door of top esports, RNG, EDG, and FPX. Those for me are like solidly top 4, almost unquestionably top 4. And then W is going to be 5th, kind of looking upwards.
I think a question mark for me is like you hit on there, right? That WE were pretty good at playing around Breathe early on. My problem is that it's like you're saying though, it would be hard, right? Because 1-4 wasn't really a thing, but we never saw them able to incorporate him in the team in mid or late game almost at all, which is really weird because I actually do think Breathe is also a pretty good team fighter, but you'd really never see them sync up of like him getting out of a side lane, joining in on like a flank or a team fighter or anything like that. And I'm very scared that they are going to be one of the teams that, like we were talking about with EDG, that maybe they're going to look at their bot lane, because since they've had this bot lane, it seems that they've kind of like babied them with attention, and like especially Jomung with like setting him up to succeed, because when he falls behind, he does just kind of run it down. I'm scared that you said it. They can have this amazing 1-3-1 sort of style, but I feel like they're still going to default to like, hey, let's put Jomung on a hyper carry and let's put out the 5v5 team fight, which can work, right? It definitely can work, but there's more question marks with that style. So yeah, WE I think are going to be an interesting one. They have the most upside, but I feel like the good thing for them is at worst, I think they just end the same. They just end 6th once again like they did in spring, right?
Yep.
I don't really see this team able to drop down much more than where they already were.
But at least there's a new limit. At least there's not new limit, but a new potential.
New ceiling.
Yeah, new ceiling. WE, I think we did this on broadcast, Jordan, where we talked about the curse that is WE, where for the past 3 years since they went to Worlds, it's been round 1, round 2, round 1, round 1, like they've never gotten further than round 2 in recent history. So hopefully this breaks that curse and breaks the mold, and they're able to push further forward. 4 more teams to go. Running forward, we have talked about them a little bit in comparison and reference. Top Esports, new top laner Qingtian, who's alongside 369, who's still on the roster. Kasa in jungle. Knight is in mid lane. Jaculov, Dwar, Yuyanja, that's your bottom lane. Warhorse is on this roster, and Serlin with Crescent, who's actually come back from vacation. I don't know if you guys saw the Crescent video where he's coming back. It's actually so good. If anyone's checking it out, go to Top Esports Twitter. He's coming out of a holiday, and it's just an amazing little production piece there. Would recommend after this video. Top Esports, Emily, I'm really happy in this roster. I'm happy that there's someone behind 369. We talked about the fire. I think I'm more just happy to see that, okay, they're sticking with the same members in the roster, and it's like, let's give Summer a try and see if they can recover from what was still a decent spring, but people like Knight didn't play to his limit. I think, we could see more out of Jackie Love too as well, to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think so from what the rumors are, I don't know how much this has been confirmed, but apparently the rumors around the top lane swap was that, 369 felt like he wanted to be played around a lot more. And they tried and it didn't always work, or they weren't always able to convert topside advantages. So now they're bringing in Qingtian to see how either to light a fire under 369, or I don't know if he is starting or not. But it'll be interesting. The rest of the team, I think, is obviously really, really good. And then it's just a matter of like, I don't like to get into LPL drafting for reasons that Jordan already stated. If you have an LPL team that feels like they play a certain way really, really well, objectively, their drafts could be absolutely awful, but it's fine because they're comfort picks and it's within certain parameters in the meta that they'll be able to perform on them. But my gosh, the drafts from TES sometimes are just, they blow my mind, honestly. They will sometimes just like decide to go for every strong pick. I think they're more susceptible to this on red side, where they sometimes, like, you'll just see they just go for lane encounters and then they end up with a team composition that's like full of strong champions, but they have no way of like interacting with each other. And TES are like, well, we have the hands, so why does it matter? We don't need a team composition. And in fairness, they're not punished frequently enough sometimes to stop doing this. But for me, it wasn't even about the roster necessarily. It was literally just about drafting better. Like, this is the one team where I would just be like, please draft better. Like, please draft something that's at least cohesive and doesn't have like one win condition, and you guys will be fine. Like sure, some of your neutral objective contests are not always the best, but like even still, like this is a team that can just fight so well sometimes. Yep. And they kept handicapping themselves in draft, and this is probably not the evaluation of TES that people wanted to hear, but this team is, in my opinion, definitely top 4, possibly top 2, contending for the title. So I'm going to be a little bit harsher on them for that reason.
It's honest.
So originally I was just going to talk about Qingtian because I've actually watched so far I've only gotten 2 series done, but I watched 2 of the YM series from playoffs against FPB and SDX. But I saw a comment in chat that kind of broke my heart. I saw someone say top esports need a jungler that's not washed. And it blows my mind because I feel like when you look at playoffs, Karsa was by far the best player on this team. He gapped every single jungle he played. He dismantled SOFM. He destroyed Jeje despite the fact that they got 3-0'd, and he was much better than Wei in the RNG series. And I feel like Karsa is always going to be one of those junglers where, if you look at his like pathing in a vacuum under a microscope, you're going to point out like all the things that could be better in an ideal world if like lanes go this, but it's like, it's not like that with Karsa. It's not like that with TS. I feel like you have to view him under the same lens that you would maybe have to view like Ning back in the day, as like, this is a weird team to jungle on.
Good comparison.
And Karsa, I think, is probably the most creative jungle in terms of like how fluid he is with his game plan in the game. Like, again, some of the ganks he pulls off where you're just like, it makes no sense to go for this. If this doesn't work out, you are so far behind. Like, you are out of the game. Mm-hmm. And again, he just knows how to pull it off. He believes in his mechanics. He's the type of jungler where top esports, I think, are the biggest offender of coin flipping barons. But it almost always works out for them. Karsa is an absolute smite king. So, yeah, I definitely think Karsa in high pressure situations, right? We even go back to Worlds with like the Fnatic series and stuff like that. Karsa's their best player whenever this team gets to high pressure. I think this guy is like the glue of this team. I feel like almost any other jungler, top esports would be an extremely different team. But, that's enough of my Carson rant. So I'll kind of talk about Xingtian a bit because, again, I'm sure maybe not all of us have had the time to like kind of dig into the VODs yet. But this guy apparently is super hyped among people who have watched the LDL. He's has the most like MVPs for the LDL in playoffs. So he's a player where, in terms of laning phase, I think he's very good. When he has a winning matchup, he knows how to push it to its extreme. But on the other end of that, I think he's the kind of player that knows he's better than everyone else in the league. So he very typically will like overextend, get caught out, die, like these kind of like basic mistakes. His team also played around him heavily. His mid laner, who we'll talk about later because he's on up, and his support would like constantly roam towards the top lane and give him pressure. So I think in terms of early game, this guy's a bit of a question mark how he'll do in LPL. But team fighting, this guy is an absolute monster. I think he's gonna come in probably much better than 369, which is weird to say because, again, he's coming from LDL, much harder to judge. But there's so many games I'd watch where YM would like be even or at a deficit in mid game, and he single-handedly finds like a massive flank or a massive Gnar engage or like flash stuns on Renekton, and like the perfect moment for the carry, and just takes over the game. So I think this guy is a good pickup, even if he doesn't work out right away. I think in the future, like, this is a guy that a lot of people have high hopes for. I think he does look really good, but I gotta say, I'm so sad for 369. 369 was my favorite top laner in the LPL. I think much worse this year, but to me, like, when we looked at 369 last year, he was one of the only top laners that like top esports would play around him on carries, to where, right, we never really get to see JDG do that with Zoom. But last year he actually had really good like weak side picks. Like his Ornn was actually like really good. His Gragas was decent. Definitely wasn't this year, but he was like the most flexible. It was like the middle ground of like a team like IG with a Shy and a team like JDG with Zoom, to where, right, sadly for Zoom, he's kind of forced to play the way he does, and the Shy's the Shy. So yeah, I think it kind of sucks that 369 potentially won't be the starter. Again, we don't know, but 369 is definitely good enough to be a top laner in the LPL. And again, whether this was his choice or not, it just kind of sucks that there's a potential that we might not get to see this guy playing, because I don't think one bad split or one like up and down split really means anything when he's been a solid performer the previous 2 years. So yeah, I don't know. Top lane change will be very interesting.
I think 369 is, you're right. He's also in my top list of top laners, but also just favorite top laners to watch. I remember it was also 2019. Was that his debut year, 2019, when he came in and he, and he, he played against the Shy, and he played against all these other top laners, and he kind of held his ground. And you could see towards summer as well just how good this top laner was. I also love those little fangirl moments where, there's that video of him that went viral of the Shy adding him or asking to add the Shy and saying, like, I'm your fan. That was amazing. Do we have any more final says on top esports before we move on? Has everyone gotten out what they need to say? Because I think this is a top 4 roster. I agree completely. This is a roster that, not just bouncing off a spring, it still has the same great players. Xingtian will be a good question, Lyric, so I like that you've mentioned that, and we'll see how the coaching staff adds to that as well. I'm going to move on to TT. We have 3 more teams left remaining. Momentarily as well, sorry, before we do that, Lyric. Xingtian, you said he likes to, he thinks he's the best. He kind of likes to extend himself. He can be quite aggressive. There is another top laner in the league who was very much like that, who thought he was the best and kind of made, sometimes foolish errors. That's all I'm going to say. You know who it is. And moving on to TT. TT, we have Lungshik. We have Chalitza up in the top lane. We have Xiaopeng and Vivi, who, if anyone watched Code GS, I'm going to say Buitsa, because that's fantastic anime. Shout out. We have 4 mid laners on TT. Not 3, we have 4. We have,
You just know Chola's going to end up starting again.
You know it's going to be Twilight. We have Sky in there, and Captain's also on that roster as well, but you're right, probably Twyla. We have Sam D as the ADC. We have Patch, the new player, on to support. Chris and Shiri are the coaching staff. Who wants to start with TT? Because, again, like, there are a lot of thoughts about this roster when it was a bit more cut and dry, people like Captain as well, everyone had a big opinion on. We still have Lungshing up in that top lane. Is anyone feeling excited for this roster or knows kind of where to put them at this point?
I have not done the scouting.
I'm honestly
Mark.
I like this roster, but I like this roster because I love Longxing. You know, like I don't care the community perception. Longxing will always have like a place in my heart and some respect
I know.
because he is like that. He's that serviceable soldier that's gonna do his job and he's gonna do it decently no matter what. I think he had a really good performance at the previous Worlds with LGD. So that's definitely. I think this roster has upgraded in my mind because I think Longxing's definitely better than Chalitza. The fact that Xiaopeng is still here and they can keep him as a godsend. One interesting thing about this team as well is he coming in, or however you'd say his name, he is also like Crime, who we mentioned before in OMG, that you look at this guy's match history, it is all assassins. It's Zed, it's LeBlanc, it's
Whoa.
Echo. Like, so we have two of these players coming into the league, but I feel like you probably don't sacrifice the Xiaopeng Twyla synergy, but if they would, it kind of sucks we never got to see them. Like, we never got to see Captain play with Xiaopeng, which blows my mind.
I
I
wanted to
kind
see
of
Captain
disagree
so
with that.
badly.
Yeah, and they only played him with when they had like Vivi or Bless trying out at the very beginning, where it's like, no, why don't you use this guy with your actual best player? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But Sam D was already performing well in spring. The fact that they're bringing in another Korean player in the bot lane, it's like cool. Now there shouldn't be any communication issues down there. But I think again, this team has a potentially clear cut, at least focus on the map where they're going to be a very bot centric team like they were before because Sam D and Teen were good laners. Hopefully they can keep that through with Patch coming in. And the big question to me is just going to be which mid laner they use and how they interact with jungle. To be fair, how do we talk about this team when we have no idea what mid laner they're going to use, and mid laner is probably the most important role in the game? Like, my God, TT.
Clement.
For me, this team was like on the top of the dumpster. It's just below the lid. Like once you take the lid off, you see ThunderTalk like smiling back at you. So they didn't have a lot of prospects, and I actually hold a different opinion about Xiaopeng and Twyla. I actually feel like this combination's somewhat toxic. Like the problem with them is Twyla has to go for some really really weird picks, and Xiaopeng has to further him. And in the LDL, what happened was that they would play for Xiaopeng. Twyla would hard push, and then Xiaopeng got the advantages. But in the LPL, because the competition is so much stiffer in the mid lane, what actually ends up happening is Xiaopeng sinks a ton of his resources to barely keep Twyla afloat. And I think that's actually toxic for the team. I know they've been a long time duo, but I would much prefer to see Xiaopeng actually link up with Sam D. And I think Sam D is going to be the future of the TT roster. Sam D is the sole point on the map that's actually positive in GD. All the rest of the points are negative, and him alone is positive, which I think is actually an incredible feat. If you think about the agency that marksmen have, it's very, very hard to do that. It's almost impossible to be the only point on the map that's winning when the rest of your map is losing. So
I mean, we have
I hope
Longxing now, brother. We have Longxing. It's okay.
Yeah.
He won't be that far behind.
so. I think this team has a very clear way to play, and I agree with Jordan. In the end, it should be the bot lane, but I'm not sure that Xiaopeng and Twyla are the love duo of this team. I actually would prefer to see basically anyone else.
I agree. So I'm a huge Xiaopeng fan. I have been since he debuted. And I just every time they try to pair him up with another mid laner, Twyla just finds his way back onto the starting roster. And
Somehow.
I don't know if it's because like he feels like he plays super well with Twyla and it is a toxic relationship as Clement described, but I would really love to see them commit to like using Captain, using another mid laner alongside Xiaopeng and seeing how he does for more than like a few series. Because I'd like to see Xiaopeng develop outside of Twyla, and I don't mean to like so heavily criticize Twyla, but I do think his champion pool is pretty limited. He can't stand up to a lot of the other LPL mids, and if you're gonna have that happening already, why not try out one of your mids that you think can develop a little bit further? Because I do think Twyla's been around long enough that we've seen as much as we can get out of him, and I will there end my shitting on Twyla section now. But I would love to see Xiaopeng with a different mid who has a little bit more control over mid, give them a chance, see if they
Yeah.
can stand up to other LPL mids, and see how Twilight can do. See how Xiaopeng can do. He makes
That's
some
how they
weird
get you.
decisions sometimes. No, he makes some weird decisions sometimes, like turret diving. Maybe he shouldn't, or contesting enemy jungle camps, and maybe he shouldn't. But I've always appreciated that about him. Like I love I love the aggressive junglers, you know, even if it's not the best decision. So that's why I've loved Xiaopeng for a while now.
That's what, like, to me, talking about this, and again, thinking about Rogue Warriors earlier, I'm just so depressed. Haro and Xiaopeng are not on, like, at least middle tier teams. That breaks my heart that we have like such amazing junglers in LPL. It's probably the deepest talent pool position, in my opinion, probably in LPL.
is.
That like you can have these terrible teams with like great junglers. And it is
And I
you know,
add a point on that.
Please.
What's crazy to me is that we have two other junglers that could be like best in their role in other leagues. Meteor is not on a roster,
Yep.
and Jinja is not playing. Jinja's Korean
True.
rank 1
Mhm.
jungler. And you have those two guys not on teams, and I was just like, how is that possible? This league could be so much better.
Yeah, I think the media point, because media's not on any roster, is a big shame. But you're right. Like these
I hope he
junglers.
doesn't go back to ping pong. That would be a waste. Oh.
Well, I don't know, man. He was pretty
God.
good at ping pong, so either way, I think he's going to be winning it live. We have 2 more rosters to go. My webcam for some reason keeps going green, so it's a sign apparently that I need a new webcam and that we're getting towards the end of the show. We have
got over 2 hours.
not well. You guys are smart. You're wise, so it doesn't matter about the time. Not unlimited potential. Ultra Prime. Now, when I saw UP, I thought, oh my.
Unlimited potential.
I'm like, unlimited potential. Here we go. Here we
Legends
go.
back.
Here we go. So it is Ultra Prime replacing Estar. The logo's kind of sick. I love the kind of lightning to it. We have ZS in the top lane. We have Hacker in jungle. We have Xiao Sao Bao, and there's, look, webcam's going green again. We have Irma there as well. And apparently I have to switch device, so I've actually just ruined the stream for a second and swapped everyone's webcam. We have Irma in the mid lane. We have SMLZ and Xiaoxi, Green Tea and Panda. And while I fix my webcam as to whatever's going on, who wants to start us off with Ultra Prime? Because the roster's not too bad with SMLZ finally joining the Rift again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, you go first.
I'll just give context again on the new player, because again, Xiao Saobao comes over from Young Miracles, so again, I've kind of watched him play, and again, it's very interesting to me because much more people are high on Qingtian coming in than they are on him, but I find this guy so interesting. He's pretty much the complete opposite of those other players coming from LDL that I talked about, where it's like they're all assassins. It's like this guy is all control mages. He's the Orianna player. He's the Victor. He's going to pull out Corki in certain situations. And he has like a pocket pick Rise that he really likes to bring out. And to me, he's like a jack of all trades, master of none player, to where in LDL, he was like a solid laner. I don't think he was like a standout. He wasn't necessarily dumpstering anyone. But this guy is constantly moving around the map. His teleport usage is absolutely excellent. He was continuously covering for Qingtian in the top lane. He's great in sides with Rise. I think he's going to quickly come in as one of like the best side laning mid laners in the league.
Okay.
But yeah, I have a lot of respect for this guy. I think the one thing is, because again, I'm saying he's kind of jack of all trades, master of none. I don't think he can really function as a main carry just yet, or at least I don't expect him to, because mid lane competition in the LPL is hard. So the fact that he was kind of above average in LDL, I think isn't a good sign for LPL. But I think this guy has a lot of good. He's like a really good foundation to build on. So I really love this pickup by Up.
That's okay that he's not a carry, because we have SMLZ who demands
True.
all resources go bot lane. So my issue with SMLZ is not that he is bad, because he's very obviously not, but the fact that every single team he's been on seems to always inevitably funnel their resources into him, right? And that can be a massive issue for a team like this that didn't perform particularly well as Estar last split. I actually think it's fine because it gives them, like, I look at this and I'm like, okay, with what you said about Xiao Sabao coming in and what I know of SMLZ and also Xiaoxi, that could work. Like that at least gives them on paper a pretty like clear cut identity of the fact that they're going to play around bot lane. They're probably going to make SMLZ the primary carry. And so we'll see how that works. But like I now feel like I have a very good understanding of exactly how this team's going to want to play.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. Which I think Clement, maybe you can add like kind of more depth, because I remember one thing that you and Jake talked about early in last split was again how surprising it was, if you remember, that Estar actually played a lot around ZS early on, right? Like they actually put a lot
Yeah.
of resources into top lane early on in the split. So yeah, what are your thoughts kind of on this roster holistically?
So I think it's a massive difference changing Rat for SMLZ. Rat was a guy that demanded no resources and wasn't very good in the lane. So essentially what they had to do was hard force ZS to take resources and play around Herald. It gave Chelsea somewhere to roam to, and Irma is self-described a roaming mid laner as well. So, if you have two roamers in the bot lane and not a very good laner in your ADC, you're going to roam top lane. But I think the closest this roster right now is going to be like is 2018 Rogue Warriors. I think this is the closest that you're going to get. It's basically Mouse, Doimby, and then SMLZ. But the question for me is Chelsea and SMLZ. That duo, for me, does not work on paper. Chelsea basically learned his game from Sword Art, and we saw what happened with Sword Art and SMLZ were on the same team. That was Suning 2019, and it was a disaster.
True.
It was basically every time someone leaves lane, SMLZ is going to die. He had the highest deaths out of any AD carry. Even
Sword Art
top
had to play
Ekula.
Yuumi every game at some point. Remember, like if Sword Art wasn't playing Yuumi, they were not like doing well in
God.
lane.
You remember the game where actually Sword Art played an AD carry and then SMLZ played Yuumi?
Yeah.
That was so
Yeah.
funny.
I
That was
remember that. Yeah, that was
hilarious.
hilarious.
It's like, you know what? I'm not leaving lane. You can roam. I'll stick to you, but I'm not moving. Which is
Problem
basically
solved.
SMLZ's motto.
Oh,
That was
God.
so funny. And
That's great.
that's my only problem with this team. I think if they want to, they can play like a Rogue Warriors, and I think the pieces fit. ZS is a weak side top laner. He is not your carry point. So he would fit much more actually folding down into the bot lane. But Chelsea, even in his best split in the LMS, they actually weren't a dominant bot lane. Like Chelsea's strengths are not necessarily 2v2. He's much more of a roamer. They played second fiddle to
They
Unified.
just need Hacker to level 2 gank every game like Wade did on Estar, right?
True.
If you level 2
Yeah,
and level
there
3
you go.
gank every game, your laning doesn't matter. So easy solution, Clement.
Okay, maybe that will work, but that's like pretty much my only worry about the team is the dynamic between Chelsea and SMLZ. If they can coexist in lane and SMLZ doesn't die every time Chelsea leaves, this team's actually fine. This team will have a solid upgrade. I think it leapfrogs, they were like the 16th place team last time, but I think this team can easily, jump leapfrog someone like OMG now that they have a very sizable carry. Like OMG's problem is they probably still don't have a carry. So
Yeah.
they will move up in the ladder.
So
yeah,
do you,
and
Go on.
only time will tell, but I also expect Shasa about to be an upgrade in mid. Again, I really like the way he played on YM, but YM played as a team, and again, like everything was in unison, everything was in sync. I think it'll be interesting seeing a guy like this come into a team where maybe that isn't necessarily the case. But yeah, I have a lot of high hopes on this mid laner.
I wanted to ask you guys and just get a rounding out of UP because I'm pretty excited for this roster just because it's like it's a massive question mark, right? They could be, towards that 14th, 13th, let's say, or they could make it up. Is
Say
any
14th.
would anyone put them further up? Like if Clements is 14th, anyone put them towards playoffs as a potential? Like, do you see a world where they could be like that Rogue Warriors, super team, the 2018? Obviously doesn't have the same caliber, but we still have, a lot of potential.
I wasn't casting the LPL when SMLZ was good. My favorite split of LPL in recent memory was 2019 summer. So my opinion of SMLZ is
Not high.
isn't what it should be. So
Yeah. He
No.
was a must-ban Kog'Maw player, and he was like 30% team damage consistently. Like he was that strong, and there was a lot of good team fight performances. Like he was a guy that was willing to stay in the fight until the last auto attack was about to go off, and then he'd flash out. Like, he was very, very high damage profile, and actually stayed relatively safe as well. So I really liked SMLZ, but we do have to be honest. Like, what happened to him is that he had a number of injuries and he had to go into rehabilitation.
Yep.
Like, his back hurt and his hand hurt and stuff like that. So he wasn't able to play at 100%. And it was very clear that he did not have any synergy with Sword Art. Like, it was really funny because I remember the playoff series where out of nowhere he locked in a Jhin, and Sword Art looked so surprised. Sword Art was like, what just happened? And he didn't understand what happened, and that was the level of disjointedness that you could clearly see that they even on picks they didn't know what each other was gonna do.
It was rough.
Yeah.
2019 for him was rough. I hope this is his redeeming year, or redeeming split rather, because when he wasn't on a roster even at the start of this year, I was quite surprised. So,
He was always second best under Uzi for quite a long period of time. So.
And I remember, was it 2016 or 2017 OMG? I think it was the last time they made playoffs where he was playing with Cold in the bottom lane, and like Cold's dedication to that lane actually made SMLZ look really good as well. So I think it was best split for both of them, but especially SMLZ. That's Ultra Prime, not unlimited potential. It will happen in the split. I guarantee you I'm going to call them unlimited potential. We only have one team left, and I thank everyone for their patience. I thank you guys for sticking around with me for the full 2 hours. I know it's been long, but we blame the LPL for this. There's 17 teams. It's not our fault. V5 is the very last one. And V5, oh my god, here we go. Invincibles in the top lane. We have Jug God, who was previously known as Yoshin in the jungle. PZX alongside him as well. Two junglers no one's heard of. Uniboy's now in the mid lane of this team. He's moved from LGD. We have Kepler as the AD carry and ZYF as the support. Domo and Zero are the coaching staff. And it feels like the coaching staff of this team are much more critically acclaimed than any of the players, maybe bar Uniboy. That's V5.
I guess we'll start because this is the most like new developmental team in the league. I've watched a few of these guys. Kepler, he's from the SDX roster. Watching Demacia Cup, maybe you guys remember them. They were there, and he, in my opinion, was the standout of the team. He's much more of like a late game team fight AD carry rather than like lane dominant. He's gonna pick things like the Tristana, the Jinx, the Kaisa. But my qualm with this team is, so you have him, but then in your top lane, Invincible, he actually comes from V5's LDL team. He was pretty much only a carry player. Jace, Camille, these kinds of things every game, but he's not very good. Consistently losing lane when he has counter picks, not really good in sides, pretty much does what Clement was talking about Scout doing, where he'll like over-index and force his team into bad positions, but he never played tanks. So you have like a pretty decent AD carry. I think Kepler, from talking to people in the LDL and talking to LPL teams, he was actually very highly sought after for a little while, probably a top 3 AD carry. Uniboy is a pretty good pickup. Jug God was on Funplus Blaze.
Yep.
And to me, he was just kind of like an average LDL jungler. He's more of a carry player, but, played the Olaf, the Hecarim, kind of full clears, does his job. Didn't stand out to me, at least in the games that I saw so far. But I think this team should have a clear style of playing towards bot lane when you have Kepler. And I think Uniboy, even going back to the old HQ days when he filled in for PSG, looks much better in my opinion when he's on things like Galio or like Set when he was at that World Championship, things like that. But this team just doesn't have the talent to be competitive. I'm sure we're all going to say the same thing, but I think stylistically, this team's going to be interesting. How do you have two sides of the map that want resources, but neither one of them is like top esports level good to where you can just throw your jungler under the bus and let him lose everything,
I guess my question for you is, I'll be honest, I haven't really looked into these players, but can this team avoid being the bottom feeder team of the LPL? Or is that going to still go to Rogue Warriors?
I think this team can avoid it because, again, when I look at Rogue Warriors, I'm like, okay, in my mind, this is the Haro and Zhong Wuji show. To
Not
where
the Ice Coke show? Okay, never mind, sorry.
We'll see.
To where, I do think Uniboy is fine, and I think Kepler can be good. Again, I think top 3 AD carry in the LPL from what I saw, from talking to what others think. So I think this team has potential, but to me, this is the most likely team to finish, last place because ZYF, I haven't watched any of his games since he went back to LDL, but I remember when he was in LPL last time filling in, wasn't that good. Again, you have a BuBu in top lane that is 10 times worse than BuBu. You have a guy who Jake's gonna call the third the Shy, and he's very clearly not the Shy. And I think you have average junglers for LDL level. So what's that make them in LPL, right? Yeah, I think this team is going to be Uniboy, Kepler, kind of carry or bust. We're really looking at 80 carry for this team, I guess, overall, because, right, Uniboy isn't much of a carry himself.
True, he didn't have a good last split. I was really disappointed when, because we saw Uniboy, who, Luke, you don't agree?
It was decent. Like, I mean, the thing is, you look at that
Was
LGD
it the team
roster,
environment?
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, you look at that LGD roster, and it's like, really, what could he do? And again, I don't think Uniboy is the type of player who should be a primary carry for a team. He's much more of a secondary carrier. Again, a push and move type player that is going to work with a jungler to set up someone else. So at least on this roster, in theory, they have that in this new AD carry. But I think the other three pieces are just complete question marks or complete random pickups. Like this to me looks like V5 want a piece out of LPL. But I mean, they just built their stadium in Shenzhen, so that's
use it for something else.
Maybe that's why they need to save me on the roster.
Valorant's coming up in a big way,
It's so
one
weird
thing
too, because you would think this team made big money off the players they sold.
True.
They sold a lot of high tier players, so
that went into the
I think
stadium.
it's very interesting that they went so budget.
Emily?
One point I want to make about Uniboy in regards to the meta we might see that might keep them out of last place is if we still see AP junglers. I do think your point about Uniboy sometimes looking better on something like a set mid or maybe something that is a little bit more of a tankier initiator type where he can affect side lanes and or like partner with his jungler and help them out. Maybe that could help this team out, because if you have a mid laner that doesn't demand the same amount of resources that top and bot are going to be fighting for most likely, that can help facilitate, like just by removing, one lane that needs to carry. The flip side to that is if he continuously gets shoved in, then that is also a problem. So I'm like curious. I'm like interested to watch this team, but I'm not like I don't have a lot of hopes for them. Like I'm interested to watch and see how the players do, but I don't think that they're going to make it out of bottom two.
I'm excited just to watch the bottom lane. I think just seeing development. I mean ZYF we've seen in the LPL, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of times, and he didn't really show too much, but we'll see how Kepler goes. I'm always excited for new talent coming in, even if it is the jungle pool.
Also, I just checked real quick to go on the Invincible point. 3 of his 4 most played champions in his career. His most played is Jace, his second most played is Camille, and his fourth most played is Fiora. So, like, again, this is a guy who, like, he watches the Shy, and that's what he wants.
Shy, yeah.
Okay.
So I think this team will either be like a pleasant surprise or a really fun like dumps, like one of those like hobo like bonfires. You see a bunch of drunk people just standing around, like that could be
so many trash analogies.
I know our comparisons for trash have been great tonight.
So good.
I do want to add, like, this is something that Jordan has actually mentioned, but these coaches to me are pretty interesting. Both of them have been on WE, and we have seen WE actually be really good at picking up talent. They brought up Breathe, they brought up Missing. And Domo for me was really the most integral piece that actually made W a good roster, because he understood how to basically play around a bunch of rookies and craft a system that allowed to cover each other's weaknesses. And that is something that I feel like it's incredibly valuable on a coach's. And if you look at Domo's coaching record, he's been nothing but excellent. G-Rex in the past.
Always rookies, right? He's known for like bringing rookies that no one believed in to like the international stage. He did that in LMS constantly. So yeah, if anything, that's a good point, Clement. This is like the perfect roster for Domo. This is probably where Domo like thrives.
Yeah, I actually think that this would be the roster where the coaches get paid more than the players, and for good reason. And that's a good reason why they might not be last.
Could be a really good challenge. Well, V5 aren't last. I mean, yeah, you have to start and take a step back and look back at the track history of people like Domo, people like Zero as well. Those were our 17 rosters. We've finally done it. We started 2.5 hours ago. So thank you for bearing with me. And I'm sorry I told you this would probably be about an hour and a half. Obviously, I don't know how to run shows, so that's okay. You stuck with me for the longest time. Before we finish up, because I know you guys have been patient enough already. I just wanted to get from each of you your favorite team running into the split. Doesn't have to be the best, doesn't have to be like your number one, but maybe your favorite of like the roster you're most excited for, the team you want to play, watch play the most. Obviously for me it's going to be IG, just because I want to see this new top laner and see how good Nenny is, and if Shun gets better from last split as well and Rookie returns, because then I think, wow, maybe IG have a bit of fire under them. Clement, we'll start with you. What is a roster you're looking towards, your love for the summer split, a roster that you can feel excited about?
Man, I really want to see top esports play well. I still think by far they're the best roster in the LPL, just pound for pound. They have the best talent on that team, and they have unlimited resources backing that. So every split, they're going out and basically just buying the best player on LDL market. They're going to Young Miracles constantly for talent and stuff like that. So top esports, I really want to see them work. They are basically the Yankees of the LPL, and because we have international tournaments, I do want the heavy spenders to actually continue to work out. And Qingtian has been known as the second coming of Stanley. Stanley's still alive, but he's kind of been known as that kind of split pushing player that can really ignite things. So top esports for me is the pick to go. I feel like Knight in a new meta, if he can play a side lane, that would be absolutely amazing. I think with all the criticism that he's had in Spring Split, it's about time that he should finally push himself to pop off, and this roster still has the highest ceiling out of any single team, I think, in the world.
I like that. Emily, would you like to go next? What team and takes your fancy? What's the one you're most excited for?
WE.
WE.
Like I said, I think adding Mole to that team, like they were already, with all of the criticism that I already levied in their direction, they were already a top 6 team, right? They ended 5-6. So I mean, I think, or no, they ended just below because they got obliterated by Suning. But anyway, I think that's such a huge upgrade for them to have not just a stable mid laner, but a mid laner that really understands how to play for the map and how to play for their jungler. If he and Peishang can work well, even at a baseline level, work well together, this team is going to be insanely strong.
True.
And like I said, I think the world of Peishang, he's my favorite jungler to watch, probably in LPL. I mean, obviously the caveat is SOFM because he's always doing weird stuff, but I think Peishang is incredibly good. And I really, really want this mid-jungle combo to work out, because if so, I think it really catapults WE to be contending for top 4.
Finally, Jordan, Lyric.
So I'm happy that Emily took WE, because WE would be my answer too, but I really don't want to hit on them just because everyone who watches this knows I love Mole. So it's pretty much redundant for me to talk about how WE is my favorite because they have Mole. So I want to go with the surprising one, but I'm actually really excited to see how Up plays, because again, I really liked watching those VODs from Xiao Xiaobao, and I thought this is a very interesting player who again has a lot of those elements of a mid laner that I like, where he is very conscious and very aware of the map. He has some of that side laning ingrained in him, very good TP usage. My only question mark for him is how's he going to do in lane? But I'm kind of really excited to see that journey, even though I already talked about how SMLZ is not a player I was ever high on, but I like that Emily hit on there's at least theoretically a system that can work for this team. But Clement kind of countering the bot lane dynamic might be weird, but the point is seeing how this puzzle fits together, I think will be one of the most interesting parts of Summer Split for me.
That's true, and I always love seeing rosters come together, a little bit of a mishmash when you see people like SMLZ joining, Xiao Xiaobao coming up. There's a lot of question marks, but there's also a lot of potential, so I think that's quite exciting as well. Thank you to Clement Chu, thank you to Lyric for sacrificing their time with me. And most of all, no offense, guys, but Emily ran for last minute within 24 hours saying she could do a show at, this is a bit of an awkward time to a degree, but
True MVP.
true MVP. These guys know I love them, but Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the show anytime.
No, it was super fun.
Anytime you're welcome. I promise I will get the display boxes better next time as well. I won't cut
Like
off
I
Luke's
said,
head.
you have time. I mean,
2
making the rounds didn't figure it out for 2 years.
Yeah, I know.
And shout out to whoever Kelsey did tap to do the graphics for us because you're awesome. Thank you. They're really cool now.
Absolutely awesome. Thank you again, guys. Thank you to all our chat who've tuned in as well. We're going to be throwing it to an offline screen and then throwing to a bit of a host, but thank you again to you guys. And LPL will be starting on the 7th. That is Monday, 5 p.m. China time, which is, for any Australians, 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. I don't know. Jordan, do you know the time for... Do any of you know the time in America?
I think it's 2 a.m. for
Gaming
Pacific
time.
if I remember correctly.
Yep, 2 a.m. PST, 5 a.m. for whatever the East Coast time is, and an hour or two in between. So there you go.
And
I think the
I
trick
have no
is
idea.
East Coast time is always 12 hours
Yep, 12 hours.
ahead in
Oh.
the.
I can never remember time zones, but yeah, LPL starting soon. We're coming up in a couple of days, so good time to be looking through this VOD and everything. Thank you again, guys, and to all the chat. We'll see you later. Bye bye.